Hey guys, tonight we drift back into a world that feels familiar only in the way an old dream sometimes does. Foggy around the edges, a little too quiet, and strangely heavy with unspoken rules you don't remember learning. You step into it the way you'd step into a cool room after a long day, letting the air settle around your shoulders. Here, a woman who lives alone without a man is not just unusual, she's practically a headline waiting to happen. You can almost hear the neighbors whispering before you've even taken off your shoes. And honestly, based on how quickly people in the past jump to conclusions, you probably wouldn't survive this without at least 3 backup plans and a fake husband made of laundry sacks. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, tell me your location and your local time in the comments. It's always strangely soothing to see night owls from all over the world drifting in together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing at the edge of a narrow medieval street, the kind that seems to curl in on itself like a secret. Candlelight spills through shutters that don't quite close. Someone coughs behind a wall, a stray cat brushes your ankle. Surprised that you're upright and not carrying a loaf of stale bread, you move slowly, because in this world, speed equals guilt, and guilt equals someone dropping the word witch before dessert. The woman whose life you're stepping into tonight doesn't have a husband, brother, father, cousin, or suspiciously muscular neighbor living with her. She has no built-in shield against the noise of society. That already makes her an outlier. People in this time genuinely believed that a woman alone must be either incredibly strong or catastrophically doomed, and sometimes both at the same time. A mainstream historical fact tucked right into this dimly lit street. In many medieval towns, unmarried or unguarded women paid extra taxes simply because authorities assumed they needed closer supervision. Historians still argue whether this was about safety or just a creative way to get more money from people who couldn't easily fight back. But this lonely street also carries a fringe tidbit. Some regions insisted that women living alone could only extinguish their hearth fire at certain hours, as if fire itself behaved better when a man was around. It's the kind of rule that sounds made up, until you realize humans have always been great at inventing nonsense when bored. You keep walking, letting the world thicken around you. Laundry flaps above like tiny judgmental flags. A wooden sign creaks overhead. You smell bread, smoke, and the faint panic of somebody realizing they forgot to lock the chicken coop again. You step over a puddle that looks suspiciously warm. Best not to think too hard about that, and keep moving toward the small house tucked away at the end of this crooked line of homes. She lives here, a woman alone. No husband to send out warnings, no man to stand in doorways looking stern, no deep-voiced presence to confirm that she's respectable. She has built a life out of quiet routines and careful appearances, but tonight you're seeing her world before any of that structure becomes clear. Right now, you're simply feeling the weight of her solitude pressing softly on the windows. Her home is small, as most homes were rooms barely wider than your outstretched arms. A single table, a single bed, a single chair that lets her back crack in exactly the same place every morning. You sense the vulnerability instantly. Doors here don't click shut so much as they lean into their frames like tired elders. Locks are more symbolic than sturdy. To live alone means calculating every noise at night, memorizing which steps creak and which don't, and deciding which lie you'll tell the next time someone asks where your man of the house is. But solitude also brings a strange kind of power. You feel it in the stillness. She controls her own hours, her chores, her food, her silence. She doesn't answer to anyone when she decides to sleep in or eat the last piece of cheese at midnight like a rebellious raccoon. Sure, society frowns at her, but society also frowns at everything. If frowning burned calories, this village would be shredded. You sit at her table, listening to the tick of a cooling pot. The night settles comfortably around you, like a wool blanket that smells faintly of smoke. Outside, the world continues its little dance of rumors and early bedtimes. Inside, you feel her determination quietly holding the place together. She isn't heroic by choice, just by necessity. A woman living alone in this era doesn't get the luxury of mediocre days. Every small act, buying flour, fixing a hinge, picking herbs, becomes a performance threaded with risk and resilience. You breathe slowly. The house breathes with you. And as you sit there in her tiny, flickering world, You realize this is only the beginning. Everything she does tomorrow will be shaped by the fact that she walks this path alone, with a backbone forged from whispers, chores, and sheer endurance. You wake before dawn the way she does because in this world, sleeping late is a luxury reserved for people whose reputation isn't held together with twine and wishful thinking. The air is cool, damp, and almost metallic, like the room itself is exhaling before the village starts judging anyone. You shift under a coarse blanket that feels halfway between a comforter and a mild exfoliation tool. Outside, a rooster decides it's time to scream into the void. You can relate. As you sit up, you feel that familiar pressure around the ribs, the knowledge that simply being a woman who lives alone paints a target on your back. Not a dramatic, flaming arrow kind of target, but the subtle, people are absolutely watching kind. You open the shutters anyway, letting a pale wash of morning light spill across the cramped room. The dust drifts lazily, like it has nothing better to do. A mainstream historical fact floats quietly into your mind. In many medieval communities, a woman who lived without a male guardian had to register with local authorities just to prove she wasn't hiding anything improper. Historians still argue whether these rules were meant to protect women or to keep them obedient. Honestly, based on how quickly officials find people for blinking too loud, the answer is probably both, and also neither. You wrap your shawl around your shoulders and step outside. The ground is muddy, and your shoes make a sound like someone trying to quietly sneak away from responsibilities. You aren't the only person awake. Bakers are already firing. Ovens. Mothers are already shouting at their kids. And someone's goat is already halfway through breaking the latch on a storage shed. The world never waits for you here, especially not if you're on your own. And because you live alone, danger doesn't come in the dramatic forms people imagine: wolves, bandits, mythical beasts that definitely appeared in Uncle Gerard's very sober story. No, the real dangers are quieter, more human. A neighbor who notices you bringing home food too often. A merchant who refuses to sell you something because you aren't accompanied. A tax collector who insists you owe more because it looks like you can afford it. This place was the original subscription service. You get charged extra for everything. You walk toward the communal well, bucket in hand. You keep your posture steady upright, calm, slightly bored. That's a survival tactic, by the way. If you look too confident, you're hiding something. If you look too weak, you're prey. If you look too cheerful, you're either insane or possessed. So, you aim for that perfect balance. Neutral face, light eye contact, nothing that gives anyone an excuse to label you. The women at the well glance your way, and the gossip shifts. It always does. Their whispers weave through the morning air. One of them smiles politely, the kind of polite that could snap in half if you touched it. You fill your bucket, careful not to splash. A single drop on your skirt might become the day's hot theory. She was in a hurry. Why? The medieval world loved overthinking long before the internet perfected it. But even now, you feel a spark of stubbornness under your ribs. Living alone isn't just danger, it's independence. Quiet, thrilling, terrifying independence. You make your own money. You set your own schedule. You choose your own meals, even if choice tonight is just stale bread or slightly older stale bread. You walk home with your bucket, trying not to. Think about how heavy it is. Gravity feels personal today. Halfway back, you pass a slanted wooden notice board. It's covered in scribbles, tax reminders, festival announcements, and a quirky little tidbit. A rule stating that unaccompanied women walking after sundown must carry a lantern visible from 20 paces. Apparently the lantern doesn't protect you, it just tells everyone where you are, which is somehow worse. Historians still debate whether rules like this genuinely reduce danger or simply helped busybodies judge more efficiently. By the time you reach your door, the village has fully woken. Men argue about grain weights. Children sprint in chaotic zigzags, proving once again that human beings under age 10 contain infinite energy and zero coordination. A dog trots past carrying a shoe that definitely does not belong to its owner. Life hums, and you slip back inside your little house. You set the bucket down and rest your hands against the table. This is the moment she feels every morning, the tension of being watched, paired with the freedom of answering to no one inside these walls. It's a strange balance, a tightrope. One misstep, and you're a rumor. But if you walk it well enough, you carve out a life that's yours alone. You breathe slowly. Remember, in this era, Danger hides in human assumptions more often than in dark forests. And today, like every day, you will navigate those assumptions with quiet precision. Because living alone without a man isn't just unusual here. It's practically a defiant act. You ease into the softer light of mid-morning, when the world finally stops yelling long enough for you to hear your own thoughts. The village isn't peaceful, nothing in this era is peaceful, but it's predictable, which is almost the same thing. A cart rattles over stones. Someone drops a pot and swears in a whisper because their grandmother is within scolding distance. The air smells like rye bread, smoke, and the faint panic of someone realizing they've been boiling the same cabbage since yesterday. Today, your thoughts settle on a truth that shapes your entire place in this world. If a woman lives alone, people automatically assume she must be a widow. It's the most socially acceptable explanation. Widowhood, ironically, is one of the few statuses that grants a woman more freedom than marriage ever did. You don't cheer for her husband's death, this isn't that kind of story, but you do notice how the world softens slightly when it thinks you've already paid your dues in grief. A mainstream historical fact slips into the room like a draft. In much of medieval and early modern Europe, widows could own property, run businesses, and appear in court without a male representative. That was enormous, nearly revolutionary. Historians still argue whether this expanded authority was meant to empower them or simply to keep economic wheels turning when men conveniently kept dying. But here's a quirky detail most people never hear. In some regions, widows were expected to wear specific colors for years, sometimes black, sometimes dull brown because brighter clothing was considered inappropriate cheer. Imagine mourning your spouse and getting scolded for wearing a good shade of blue. Society has always found new ways to micromanage women. You step outside again, shawl tucked around your neck. A few villagers nod respectfully now, assuming you fit into the tidy widow category. It's strange how a single presumed tragedy grants you more mobility than simply existing alone by choice. No one asks too many questions. They assume your husband died of illness, or war, or maybe even that mysterious, he traveled and never returned, situation that sounds dramatic, but probably just involved questionable decision-making and bad directions. Widowhood gives you a kind of protective cloak. It's thin, yes, closer to cheesecloth than armor, but it keeps the worst, suspicions from sticking. People see you as a woman who has known loss, and loss commands a certain kind of silence. Even gossipers tread lightly around it, like it might be contagious. You walk toward the small garden patch behind your home. The soil is stubborn this year, and the cabbages seem to be playing a slow game of, will we survive? With you, you kneel down, feeling the earth crumble under your fingers. Gardening is one of the few tasks that doesn't come with commentary from the neighbors, mostly because they're too busy failing at their own gardens. As you work, you think about how your role in this community is shaped by the absence of a man you never actually had. That's the irony. The imaginary husband grants you more legitimacy than an actual husband might have. If he were alive, he might micromanage your chores, your meals, your sleep schedule, your existence. But a dead husband? He's perfect. Silent, respectably tragic, zero maintenance, never interrupts. You to explain how firewood should be stacked at a better angle. You carry your basket toward the market square, moving at a steady pace. A couple of merchants nod. One even smiles, which in this age is basically a hug. You select onions, apples, and dried fish that smells exactly like you expect dried fish to smell. Persistent, strong enough to remind you it once had opinions. While you shop, you hear two older women debating near a fruit stand. One insists widows make the best bread because sorrow deepens flavor. The other swears that widows attract ghosts more easily because their homes hold too much quiet. Historians still argue whether medieval Europeans genuinely believed widows invited spirits, or if that was just an imaginative way to explain why their curtains fluttered at night. You avoid their eyes, not wanting to risk becoming the day's spiritual rumor snack. Back home, you set your groceries on the table and take in the stillness. Widowhood, real or assumed, creates a bubble of autonomy. You cook what you want. You manage your own finances. You answer to no husband monitoring your spending like it's a national threat. You let your mind wander into places society didn't design for you. Dreams, ideas, little rebellions disguised as normal days. The village sees you as a woman softened by grief, but the truth is quieter and sharper. You're learning to live on your own terms. Widowhood, with all its burdens, has carved out a corner of the world where you get to simply be, not a wife, not a daughter, not a servant to anyone's expectations. Just a woman surviving, rebuilding, reshaping her life, one small, steady act at a time. The house creaks gently. A pot bubbles on the hearth. You close the shutters and let the evening settle in like a warm sigh. And somewhere inside you, the realization grows. Freedom, in this age, often disguises itself as misfortune. You follow the path downward from the monastery, letting the quiet hush fade into the lively sprawl of the market below. Morning sunlight spills across the village square like someone dumped a bucket of gold paint, illuminating every stall, barrel, and loudly disgruntled chicken. The place hums with energy, vendors shouting prices, customers arguing for fun, children weaving through crowds with the aerodynamic efficiency of small, chaotic comets. You drift straight into the swirl, letting the noise wash over you like medieval white noise with occasional screaming. Here, hidden in the clatter and movement, two more figures slip through the throng lovers who've somehow managed to turn this frenzy into their safe zone. You spot them easily, because when you're tuned into forbidden romance, everything else looks like stage scenery. A young woman named Mira, a baker's daughter with flour dusting her sleeves, paces the outer stalls. You notice the way she keeps brushing her hair, behind her ear, even though her hair isn't actually in her face. It's nerves, disguised as repetition. A few steps away, wedged conveniently between a spice merchant and a barrel of fish that absolutely died days ago, stands Rowan, a messenger whose job technically involves carrying letters, not feelings, but here he is anyway. He's pretending to inspect a row of dyed ribbons, but he's holding them upside down, because concentration is hard when your pulse jumps every time Mira glances in your general direction. This is where you slide into the moving crowd, swept along between clinking coin purses and haggling voices. The air smells like cinnamon, horse sweat, raw onions, and hope, all of which probably feature in at least one medieval perfume recipe. You edge closer to Rowan just as he casually steps away from the ribbons and happens to cross paths with Mira in front of a stall selling overly optimistic cabbages. Their eyes meet. It's a tiny thing, barely a flicker, but you feel it ripple through the air like someone plucked an invisible lute string. Mira's breath catches. Rowan's posture relaxes just enough to show he's been waiting for this moment longer than he'd ever admit. A mainstream historical fact floats into your mind. Medieval markets weren't just for buying things. These places doubled as social hubs, job boards, rumor mills, dating pools, and the occasional venue for public punishment. If you wanted privacy in such a noisy place, you didn't find a quiet corner you hid in the chaos. Exactly what these two are doing. Mira inches closer, pretending to examine the cabbages. Rowan shifts toward her, pretending not to notice the fishmonger yelling about a limited-time herring discount. They're close enough now that their sleeves nearly touch. She asks softly, "Did you bring it?" He nods, hand slipping into the satchel slung across his chest. You lean in, expecting a dramatic flourish. Instead, he pulls out the loaf of bread. You blink. Mira blinks. Rowan blinks. Then he huffs a breath, trying to recover wrong pocket, and finally retrieves a folded scrap of parchment. Your first light joke of the section spills out naturally inside your head. This is what happens when you mix romance with gluten-based accessories. Mira takes the parchment quickly, slipping it into her apron before anyone can notice. They exchange a look that holds far more than the small talk words they're allowed to speak aloud. Rowan mentions he'll be heading out on a delivery route later, voice tight with the kind of sadness people pretend is casual. Mira asks where, but he only says, north. North in medieval geography might as well mean anywhere that isn't here. Historians still argue whether messengers like Rowan truly had as much freedom as romantic stories suggest. Some records claim messengers were given more leeway because their routes were unpredictable. Others argue their movements were heavily supervised to prevent exactly this kind of unsanctioned meeting. Watching Rowan's cautious glance around, you suspect the truth is somewhere between freedom with consequences attached. A juggler passes by, dropping one of his balls with a clonk loud enough to startle a baby 3 stalls over. That's your second joke-adjacent moment. Nothing says romantic secrecy like being interrupted by a man loudly panicking about runaway juggling equipment. The pair drift deeper into the market, walking parallel but never touching. They weave through clusters of shoppers, trusting noise and movement to shield them from prying eyes. At one point, Mira stops at a cheese stall, and Rowan lingers beside her, pretending to debate the merits of goat cheese versus cow cheese, like this philosophical question genuinely keeps him awake at night. A quirky tidbit pops into your mind. Medieval cheese vendors sometimes use songs or rhymes to advertise their wares, part marketing, part entertainment, part strategy to drown out competitors. Sure enough, the cheese seller here belts out a tune about curds thick enough to stand upright on their own legs. You're not sure whether that's a selling point or a medical concern. Mira uses the moment to whisper, "My father expects me home early." Rowan's jaw tightens. He knows what that means: less time, more scrutiny, fewer excuses to slip away. But he only nods, eyes soft, the kind of soft that says he'll make every second count. They continue moving, pivoting around a pottery stall with shelves so crowded you feel nervous just looking at it. Mira brushes the rim of a clay bowl, and Rowan positions himself so no one else sees the small parchment she drops inside. The potter, blissfully unaware, talks at length about glaze techniques while standing 2 feet from contraband romance. Your third light joke lands gently, as you imagine that bowl eventually being purchased by someone completely perplexed to find emotional smuggling tucked beneath their kitchenware. You drift with the lovers toward the market's edge, where the crowd thins and the noise sharpens into individual voices instead of a collective roar. Mira pauses near a stack of firewood, her face tilted slightly downward, hiding a frown she can't quite suppress. Rowan reaches out, not to touch her, but to let his hand hang just close enough that she feels the intention. He murmurs, "I'll be back before the next fair." She shakes her head, eyes shining with the kind of fear people only feel when distance becomes a threat. "You can't promise that," he hesitates. In a world ruled by storms, bandits, political whims, and horses with questionable attitudes, promises are fragile things. But he nods anyway, because hope is the only thing he can give her. A bell rings from the town church, its low tone rolling across the square, like a reminder that time is always watching. Mira steps back. Rowan lifts 2 fingers in the feet, the smallest of farewells. She mirrors it. Then the crowd swallows them both, her pulled toward home, him toward duty. You remain in the shrinking bustle, surrounded by sounds and scents and secrets. The market stalls continue to absorb like sponges. Above you, a flock of starlings cuts across the sky, moving as one, something Mira and Rowan can't do. Not here. Not yet. You drift away from the thinning market crowd, letting the echoes of Mira and Rowan's parting dissolve behind you, like the last notes of a song no one admits they were humming. The road curves toward the castle outskirts again, where the air sharpens with the metallic scent of armor polish and the faint tang of horse sweat, because medieval cavalry rarely smelled like the heroic paintings. You follow the sound of clanking steel until you spot a training yard tucked behind a palisade fence, dust rising in lazy spirals under the morning sun. Inside the yard, a knight moves through drills with a precision that borders on obsessive. Sir Cedric of Hollowmere, known for his oath, his loyalty, and the fact that he hasn't smiled since the last good harvest. His armor sits piled on a bench nearby, each piece gleaming from meticulous care. Right now, though, he practices shirt-sleeved, muscles tense, jaw clenched, blade cutting the air like he's arguing with it. You slip closer, leaning against a wooden post as Cedric runs through another sequence, a swing, a pivot, a parry so clean it slices a willow twig drifting lazily on the breeze. He's focused, yes, but underneath that calm surface is something restless. A weight he's been carrying like an invisible shield strapped to his heart. The cause of that weight appears a moment later. Lady Alina steps into the training yard, skirts gathered in one hand, her other hand holding a folded scrap of parchment as if it might float away. Her hair catches the sunlight, and her expression is the very picture of someone who absolutely should not be here but came anyway. Cedric hears her footsteps and freezes mid-swing, holding the blade poised, breath sharp enough to cut on its own. You drift a little closer, not intruding, not eavesdropping, just strategically existing near important historical drama. Cedric lowers his sword slowly, eyes locked on Alina with a mixture of longing and panic that could probably be bottled and sold as forbidden romance starter pack. "Your ladyship," he murmurs, far too formal for someone whose pulse is clearly doing somersaults. She ignores the title. "Cedric," she says softly, stepping closer. "I received your note." He swallows hard. His hands tighten around the hilt of his sword, knuckles white. You can practically hear the gears grinding in his mind, duty on one side, desire on the other, both louder than the clang of steel. A mainstream historical fact slips into place. Knights swore oaths not just to kings, but often to specific lords or ladies. Loyalty wasn't poetic. It was contractual, political, and sometimes weaponized. Falling in love with someone you're sworn to protect? That was the medieval equivalent of downloading cursed software. You might get away with it, but chances are it'll ruin everything. Alina holds out the parchment. Cedric doesn't take it, like touching it might ignite the entire yard. She steps closer and presses it gently into his hand. "You shouldn't write things like that," she whispers, voice trembling. "And you shouldn't come here," he replies. They both remain very much exactly where they shouldn't be. Your first light joke of the section sneaks in uninvited as you imagine a medieval safety manual. Step 1. Don't confess feelings to the knight sworn to your father. Step 2. Really, stop doing that. Cedric finally unfolds the parchment. You can't see the words, but Alina's face tells you everything. Whatever he wrote wasn't just gratitude or admiration. It was personal, raw, honest, the kind of honesty knights were supposed to keep locked behind their shields. "I meant none of it." Cedric lies terribly. "You meant all of it," Alina counters softly. The wind stirs dust at their feet, lifting a few stray leaves that skitter across the yard like nervous squirrels. Cedric looks away, the blade in his hand trembling slightly. You realize he's afraid not of fighting, but of what comes next. Historians still argue whether medieval knights truly loved the noble women they served, or whether later romantic literature exaggerated those tensions. Watching Cedric shift his weight, shoulders taut with centuries of suppressed emotional regulation, you suspect reality landed somewhere messy, exactly like this. Alina reaches out not to touch him, but to hover her hand near his, close enough to feel the warmth. He flinches, not from her, but from the weight of what that closeness could ruin. "Your oath," she breathes. "I know." He nods, jaw locking. "Your father would have my head." "Only your head?" You think dryly. "He'd probably take the horse too, out of spite." That gives you your second light joke moment, imagining an angry medieval lord shouting, "Confessed love, give me his head," and the horse he rode in on. Alina steps around him, moving toward the edge of the yard. Cedric watches her like he's memorizing the way she walks, for reasons wholly unrelated to battlefield strategy. When she pauses, he takes a step forward despite himself. "You asked me," she says, back still turned, "whether I ever think of a life beyond these walls." He inhales sharply. The answer is yes. Cedric closes his eyes. It might be the bravest thing he's done all week. A quirky tidbit whispers through your mind. Medieval knights sometimes sewed tiny tokens from their beloved ribbons, embroidered initials, or even strands of hair into their armor padding. Hidden, close to the heart, where no one would see. You catch Cedric's hand brushing his undershirt as if checking whether something is sewn there now. Alina turns to face him. "But that life can't be here," she says. "Not while my father controls every move I make. Not while you're sworn to him." The words land between them like a dropped shield, heavy, reverberating, impossible to ignore. Cedric finally steps closer, sword forgotten, falling to his side as if its weight suddenly became unbearable. "If I weren't sworn to him," he begins. "But you are," she interrupts gently. Silence expands, stretching between them until even the breeze respects it, quieting for a heartbeat. Your third light joke slips in as a bird overhead squawks loudly, ruining the moment with all the grace of a medieval lute player, forgetting the chords mid-ballad. Cedric huffs out a small, broken laugh. Alina whispers, "We shouldn't speak again. Not like this." But neither of them moves. Not at first. Eventually she turns and leaves the ope yard, each step slower than the last. Cedric stays rooted, watching her go, hands shaking as he finally lets the sword drop fully into the dust. He presses his palm over his chest, over the place where an oath and a longing now grind against each other like two stones refusing to fit. You stand beside him, feeling the tension settle into the air like mist. Some loves hide in gardens, some hide in letters. This one hides inside armor, and armor, as it turns out, is terrible at protecting hearts. You leave the training yard behind, trailing the faint metallic clang still vibrating in the air, and let the path pull you upward toward the castle's older tower, one of those narrow, spiraling stone cylinders designed by medieval architects who clearly hated knees. The tower rises against the afternoon sky, like a finger wagging, "Don't even think about climbing me." But you're already at the base, following a thin flagstone path worn smooth by centuries of secrets. The air grows, cooler as you ascend, shadows stretching long and silvery across the winding staircase. Your footsteps make no sound, but the stone definitely feels like it creaks in judgment anyway. About halfway up, you spot a sliver of torchlight spilling through a crack in the wall. Evidence that this tower, quiet as it seems, isn't quite abandoned. You climb higher, the air thinning, the scent of old mortar and cold air brushing your face. At the top level, tucked beneath the rafters, is a chamber small enough that even your invisible self feels cramped. A narrow window lets in a blade of light, dust drifting like lazy fireflies in the beam. Shelves of scrolls crowd the walls. A table sits at the center with 2 chairs pulled closer than medieval etiquette would approve of. This is a rendezvous point private, forgotten by most, but remembered by those who need hiding spots carved between stone and silence. And tonight, 2 figures step into that hush. The noble you followed in the garden earlier enters first, cloak pulled tight, face shadowed but tense. Moments later, the scribe arrives, slipping through the doorway with the quiet grace of someone who absolutely doesn't want to be seen because they enjoy having their job, their freedom, and their limbs attached in their correct locations. You ease to the side as the door shuts softly, like the air itself is holding its breath. They stand there for a moment, neither speaking. It's not awkward, it's loaded, like the room is full of invisible crossbows aimed at them, and one wrong word could set them off. Finally, the noble exhales. "I wasn't sure you'd come," the scribe answers. "I wasn't sure you should ask." Their eyes meet, and you feel that familiar, dangerous pull, stronger now, sharper now, like the very stones are leaning in to listen. The tower, with its view of the entire kingdom, becomes a cocoon for 2 people who are supposed to be miles apart socially, but somehow keep ending up inches apart physically. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind. Medieval nobles frequently kept high towers, not for damsels in distress, but for private councils, negotiations, and, occasionally, meetings that definitely weren't listed on official court schedules. Records show these upper rooms were often used for confidential conversations too risky for open halls. Precisely like this, the scribe sets a small pouch on the table, ink, quill, parchment, and you know this isn't just a meeting. It's a moment that could rewrite everything. The noble hesitates before sitting, fingers tapping restlessly on the tabletop. The rhythm sounds like nerves trying to escape through fingertips. You catch your first light joke swirling in as you realize the tapping pattern sounds suspiciously like medieval Morse code for panic, but make it subtle. The scribe sits opposite but leans forward, lowering their voice. "Your letters," they say softly. They're getting bolder. The noble flushes, then lifts their chin. "So is my heart. You can't help it, you tilt your head." Now that is a line that belongs on a parchment with dramatic calligraphy and at least 3 decorative swirls. But the scribe doesn't swoon. They swallow, fingers trembling slightly as they reach for the noble's hand but stop halfway. Touching is too dangerous. Wanting is already hazardous enough. A quirky historical tidbit floats up. Some medieval stair towers were intentionally built clockwise to give right-handed defenders an advantage during intrusions. You glance at the spiral outside this chamber. Yep, clockwise. Which means this private hideaway was originally meant for battle defense, and now it's hosting an entirely different sort of tactical crisis. The noble reaches forward, bridging the distance the scribe didn't dare cross. Their fingers intertwine, hesitant, reverent, terrified. You feel the air shift, becoming warm despite the stone walls. Outside the thin window, the wind sighs in what sounds suspiciously like dramatic encouragement. But the scribe pulls back just slightly. Not rejection, fear. "If anyone finds out," they whisper, "your father will send me away. Worse, he'll replace me before we can even stop." The noble presses a hand over the scribe's. "I won't let that happen." You mentally wince, not because the promise isn't earnest, but because medieval nobles saying, "I won't let that happen," typically means the universe is already sharpening its knives. Historians still argue whether nobles truly had limited personal autonomy or whether that's a dramatization. Some say noble privilege granted far more freedom than peasants dreamed of. Others argue that political alliances, inheritance laws, and reputation kept nobles more imprisoned than common folk. Watching this noble struggle to claim one small corner of their own life, you feel the argument humming in the walls. The second joke of the section flickers up as a gust of wind whistles through a crack. sounding for all the world like the tower itself is whispering, "Oh boy, this is going to be messy." The noble shifts, leaning closer until their voices blur into one soft braid of sound. They talk about futures, about possibilities, about maybe running away someday, though both know that's about as realistic as a medieval turnip performing ballet. Yet the scribe smiles anyway, because hope, even unrealistic hope, is sweeter than honeyed wine. The moment deepens, you feel it pressing into the stones, into the quiet air, into the space between them. And then, footsteps. You freeze. They freeze. The entire tower freezes. Boots on stone, slow, heavy. Coming up the stairs, the noble's face drains of colour. The scribe grabs the ink pouch, panic fluttering like a trapped bird beneath their ribs. Those footsteps get closer, far too close, and for a split second, you're convinced some guard is about to burst in demanding to know who authorized improper emotional proximity. Your third joke winks in as one thought flashes through your mind. Please let it be someone just looking for a broom. The steps arrive right outside the door. A pause, a long one. Then, the person walks past, continuing up to the battlements above. Probably a lookout doing their rounds, utterly unaware they just shaved years off both of these lovers' lives. The scribe sinks into their chair, exhaling shakily. The noble covers their face with both hands, half laughing, half dying inside. When they finally settle, their hands find each other again, more firmly now, more desperately. Fear has a way of clarifying what matters. In this quiet tower, with danger still echoing on the stairs above, two people cling to the one truth they can claim. They're already in too deep to turn back. You leave the tower's tight stone embrace behind, descending the spiral until your ankles feel mildly betrayed, and step back into open air, where the afternoon light lies soft and dusty over the main road. From here, the world stretches outward: fields, scattered farmsteads, the faint line of the forest, and beyond that, the long, winding ribbon of the pilgrimage route. You can almost hear it before you see it. Footsteps, murmured prayers, the jangle of canteens, and the creak of wooden carts rolling steadily toward distant shrines. You join the slow-moving stream of travelers as naturally as a shadow joining a shape. Dust rises around you like incense, catching the sunlight in golden swirls. Pilgrims aren't all pious. Some travel for healing, some for forgiveness, some because adventure whispered in their ear and they didn't know how to refuse. You blend among them, letting the rhythm of their walking pace pull you forward as though the road itself has decided to carry you. Near the bend in the path, you spot two figures walking side by side, not touching, not even looking at each other directly, yet tethered by something invisible. A young scholar named Thomas. All angles and ink-stained fingers, trudges with a satchel bouncing at his hip. Beside him walks Leora, a merchant's daughter turned reluctant pilgrim, her shawl pulled tight against the wind. They met only 2 days ago on this road, entirely by accident. But accidents have a way of turning into something complicated when the road is long and hearts are unguarded. You drift closer as Thomas clears his throat, the universal sign for, "I would like to speak, but my courage is defective." Leora spares him a sideways glance that could either be encouragement or mild amusement. Hard to tell. She's mastered the art of being unreadable, probably a survival technique learned during years of market bartering. "You should rest soon," Thomas says, trying for casual but succeeding mostly at endearing. Awkwardness. "Your ankle still hurts." She shrugs. "It hurts less when we're talking." Thomas blushes so fast you're surprised smoke doesn't billow from his ears. The road narrows ahead as it winds around a slope carpeted with heather. Pilgrims bunch closer together, their chants blending into the kind of soothing murmur that could lull you into a nap if you weren't very invested in watching forbidden love develop in real time. A mainstream historical fact slips into your mind. Pilgrimage routes in medieval Europe were major social intersections, places where peasants, nobles, monks, merchants, widows, soldiers, and scholars all walked the same dusty ground. Hierarchies blurred here, if only temporarily. People met who never should have met. Lives intertwined that normally would have run parallel forever. Exactly like Thomas and Leora. They reach a ridge where wind sweeps across the path, tugging at cloaks and sending stray leaves tumbling like impatient children. Leora stumbles slightly, and Thomas instinctively reaches out, then snatches his hand back before he actually touches her. You sigh a little inside. Not at him, at the universe, which loves making things unnecessarily dramatic. Your first light joke of the section threads in gently as you think, honestly, at this rate they'll confess their feelings sometime next century. Still, the hesitation is sweet in its own clumsy way. Leora smiles faintly, noticing the almost touch. She adjusts the strap of her satchel and nods toward a signpost carved with the scallop shell symbol, marking the route to a well-known shrine farther ahead. We'll camp near that stream tonight, she says. If we hurry, we might beat the crowd. The crowd, of course, audibly disagrees by immediately accelerating as if they overheard her. Medieval pilgrims were competitive like that. You follow the pair as they take a small detour off the main road toward a flatter patch of land by the stream. Travelers scatter across it, setting up makeshift camps with bundles of wool blankets, flint stones, and whatever food they've managed not to eat yet. You pass a man roasting onions, bold choice, a pair of monks arguing about the correct melody for a chant, and a dog who's trying to eat absolutely anything that looks vaguely edible, including a sandal. Leora and Tomas settle near a fallen log. She removes her boots and winces. Tomas notices immediately. Your ankle, he says again, kneeling beside her with cautious reverence, as though ankles are sacred objects requiring scholarly footnotes. I'm fine, she lies. You're not. She eyes him, half defensive, half touched. He pulls a small jar from his satchel, a simple salve of rosemary and beeswax, slightly melted from the day's heat. A quirky historical tidbit pops into your mind. Medieval travelers often carried homemade ointments because professional healers were scarce along rural roads. Some recipes were effective, others were basically wishful thinking in goopy form. Tomas dips his fingers into the ointment, then hesitates, clearly torn between wanting to help and being terrified of impropriety. Leora notices and lifts her ankle slightly. It's all right, she murmurs. Really. His touch is feather-light, unsure. You feel the moment settle around them, soft and warm, as the stream murmurs nearby. For the first time since they met, the silence between them feels less like distance and more like refuge. The sun dips lower, painting the clouds in streaks of amber and rose. Pilgrims light small fires, smoke curls lazily into the cooling air. Tomas sits beside Leora again, close enough that their shoulders nearly brush. Historians still argue whether bonds formed on pilgrimage were seen as sacred connections or romantic distractions. Some records praise them as divine encounters, others condemn them as temptations waiting to happen. Watching these two, you understand why the debate still lingers, because sometimes a road is more than a road, and a shared journey is more than coincidence. Tomas glances at Leora's shawl, noticing how thin the fabric is. Without speaking, he unwraps his own cloak and drapes it around her shoulders. She stiffens, surprised, not offended, just startled by the unexpected kindness. Then she relaxes, pulling it closer. Your second light joke eases in as you imagine Tomas internally screaming, "Act natural," while very much not acting natural. A few pilgrims begin singing a soft hymn rising over the campsite. Leora closes her eyes for a moment, letting the melody wash over her. When she opens them, Tomas is still watching her with that earnest intensity scholars get when staring at manuscripts, except she's far more dangerous than parchment. "What brought you on the road?" she asks. He hesitates. "A mistake," he says eventually. "One I'm trying to atone for." She studies him. "Everyone on this road is running from something, or toward something. And you?" he asks quietly. She looks down. "Both." A lantern flickers nearby, wind nudging its flame sideways. Someone laughs across the field. Someone else snores loudly enough to scare birds out of trees. Through all the sounds, through all the movement, the world narrows around these two, just a little. Your third light joke slips in when a pilgrim trips over his own bedroll, mutters an apology to the bedroll, then continues as if nothing odd just occurred. Medieval dignity is undefeated. As the sky deepens into twilight, Leora leans back against the log, warmth settling into her features. "Tomas," she says softly, if this were different, would you?" He doesn't let her finish, not out of rudeness. Out of fear he'll say too much. "I know," he whispers. The moment stretches, fragile as a spiderweb catching moonlight. Somewhere along this dusty path, two people who should have remained strangers found something else, instead something tentative, unspoken, and perilously beautiful. And tomorrow, they'll have to walk again, together, but not together. Not yet. You leave the pilgrims' fires behind, following the river of voices and footfalls until it fades into the evening hum of the town below. The sky deepens into a soft indigo. Lanterns flicker to life one by one, and the smell of roasted nuts mixes with wood smoke and excitement thick enough to taste. Tonight isn't just any evening, it's festival night. Music rolls through the streets like a warm breeze, and laughter bounces between the timbered houses as though the town itself has taken a deep, indulgent breath. This is the annual Masque of St. Corvin, a celebration famous for masks, dancing, questionable juggling performances, and exactly the kind of anonymity that encourages rule-breaking. You drift through the bustling square, weaving between revelers wearing feathered masks, painted visors, sparkling veils, carved, wooden animal faces, and at least one person in a homemade costume that seems to be 70% enthusiasm and 30% fabric panic. The festival's glow washes over you, torchlight flickering across silks and satins, over dusty boots and polished shoes, over faces hidden but hearts exposed. And among the swirling bodies, you spot our next pair of forbidden entanglements slipping into view. Two strangers, except not strangers, not entirely. A masked noblewoman known tonight only as the Raven, her dark feathered mask sweeping high above her brow, and a masked performer who calls himself the Fox, costume patched but vibrant, with quick hands and quicker instincts. They've never spoken before now. They shouldn't be speaking at all, given the gulf of status between performer and aristocrat. But anonymity is a seductive liar, and tonight it whispers, "No one needs to know." You drift behind the Raven as she steps away from her chaperones, who are currently distracted by a jug of festival wine and the sheer number of candles available for purchase. She moves with grace, but her breath catches when she spots the Fox juggling bright orange festival fruits under the lanterns. He isn't the best juggler. One fruit drops, bounces, and nearly hits a dog, but he grins at the mishap as if he planned it. The crowd laughs. The dog remains unimpressed. That gives you your first light joke of the section. The Fox's juggling style is maybe 60% talent, 40% chaos, and 100% deeply committed to pretending it's intentional. The Raven steps closer. The Fox notices, lowers the fruit, and executes an exaggerated bow. "My lady," he says, though he can't possibly know her rank, not truly. And yet something in the tilt of her chin, the quality of her mask, whispers nobility. She knows he knows, and that's what makes this dangerous. He offers her one of the festival fruits. She hesitates, glancing around, then takes it. Their fingers brush, just a touch, an accidental spark, disguised as courtesy, but carrying far too much meaning. A mainstream historical fact bubbles up. Medieval masquerades really did blur social lines. For one night, a peasant could dance with a noble, a merchant could chat freely with a lord, and a performer could charm someone far beyond their reach. The anonymity wasn't completely foolproof. Clothes, posture, voice, and manners gave clues, but the spirit of the night allowed people to pretend, just for a little while, that hierarchy wasn't watching. You drift closer as the Raven asks, "Are you performing again later?" The Fox tilts his head. "Only if you're watching." She shouldn't like that answer. She really shouldn't. But the way her shoulders loosen tells you she absolutely does. They step into the flow of the festival, moving toward the central square, where dancers swirl in bright, looping patterns that make the ground itself seem to pulse. A fiddler plays a lively tune. A drummer keeps pace with a heartbeat thud. Someone with a flute joins in, though either the flute is damaged or the player is. Hard to tell. Lanterns swing overhead, casting moving shadows that conceal more faces than they reveal. It's perfect cover. Historians still argue whether these festivals were truly liberating or just temporary illusions of freedom before the rigid hierarchy snapped back into place at dawn. Some say the mask was the one day ordinary people felt seen. Others insist nobles used it as a pressure valve to maintain control. Watching the Raven and the Fox circle each other through the crowd, you can see both sides reflected in their masks: desire and danger, equality and imbalance, truth and fantasy. A quirky historical tidbit nudges into your mind. Some towns use special whisper masks that funneled sound upward so secrets could be spoken without eavesdroppers hearing. You spot one or two in the crowd, long beak-like masks with narrow mouthpieces, and cannot unsee how much they resemble medieval party kazoos. The Fox extends a gloved hand. The Raven looks at it. Then, without hesitating, she places hers in his. Together they join the dance. The steps are complicated. Spin, cross, retreat, approach. The fox nearly trips on the retreat step, but recovers with a flourish so dramatic it becomes part of the choreography. The raven laughs an unguarded, honest sound, and the crowd spins around them in color and rhythm. Your second light joke of the section floats in as you notice an older man dancing aggressively with a wooden ladle as if it's his romantic partner. Honestly, he's giving everything he has. Inspiring. The dance slows into a gentler pattern. The fox leans in. "I'd know your voice anywhere," he murmurs. She stiffens, just slightly. "Would you?" she asks. "I would," he says, "but I don't want to guess. I want you to tell me who you are." She steps back. "Not far, but enough. If I tell you," she whispers. "This ends." He studies her in the lantern glow. "If you don't tell me," he says softly, "it still ends." Oof, that lands heavy. Even the music seems to falter for a heartbeat, like the fiddler heard them and thought, "Yikes." They walk away from the dance floor toward a quieter corner of the festival where the scent of spiced wine hangs sweet in the air. Couples slip into curtained booths. Merchants shout about charms guaranteed to bring luck. They won't. A poet attempts to rhyme love with dove, then realizes it's incredibly overused and panics. Your third light joke whispers in as you watch the poet pivot to love and glove, clearly proud of himself. The raven stops beneath a canopy of lanterns. Her breathing has changed shallow, anxious, caught between longing and fear. "If my family knew I were here," she says, "with you like this." "They won't," the fox says. "Not tonight, but tomorrow exists," she replies. "And tomorrow doesn't care about masks." The fox lifts her hand, not to kiss it, just to hold it carefully, reverently, as though he's afraid his own touch might crush the moment. "If tonight is all we have," he whispers, "let me have it." The raven closes her eyes. For one moment, just one, she lets him. Lanterns sway overhead, casting dappled gold across their masks. Music drifts on the breeze, soft and distant now. Around them, festival revelers laugh and dance without knowing they stand inches from a story that can only exist in borrowed shadows. Tomorrow will come. Masks will come off. Reality will snap back into place. But for now, for tonight, two people who should never meet hold on to the precious illusion that maybe, just maybe, they weren't supposed to avoid each other after all. You trail the final echoes of festival laughter as the night dissolves into a velvety hush. Lanterns gutter out one by one behind you, and the air slowly shifts from warm celebration to the crisp quiet of pre-dawn. Ahead, the town's merchant quarter begins to stir, loosening its shutters, stretching its wooden beams like an old cat waking from sleep. The scents here are different from the square. Dried spices, leather, ink, and that faint tang of ambition merchants always carry like an invisible perfume. You drift between rows of timbered shops until you reach the largest one, the Guild Hall of the Merchant Consortium, an imposing two-story building with carved pillars depicting ships, scales, and the occasional artistically exaggerated fish. Through the windows you can see candles flickering, even though it's barely morning. Merchants rise early not out of virtue, but out of sheer competitive anxiety. Inside, voices murmur. You slip through the wall, a perk of being an invisible bedtime narrator, and find yourself in a grand hall lined with ledgers tall enough to qualify as small children. Here is where deals are made, fortunes shift, and reputations fray like old rope. And at the center of it all stand two people who have far more at stake than profits. Lysandra, daughter of the guildmaster, sharp-eyed, poised, and currently pretending she's not nervous, and Corwin, a traveling spice merchant with a quick wit, quicker smile, and entirely the wrong social standing to be anywhere near the guildmaster's daughter. They stand at the far table, heads bowed over a ledger, which is a great prop for pretending they're discussing trade routes instead of feelings. Corwin traces a route on the map with his finger. "If we redirect the shipment through the southern pass," he says, "your father could undercut the rival guild by half." "You know he won't listen to you," Lysandra replies softly. "Or to me. He listens to profit." Corwin smiles wryly. "And I'm fairly certain he'd listen to us if we weren't. You know, us." Her breath hitches the tiniest amount. You settle closer, hovering above an inkwell, like a particularly judgmental muse. Their hands are almost touching on the map, fingers brushing just enough to reveal what neither dare say aloud. A mainstream historical fact drifts in like a whisper. Merchant guilds in medieval Europe wielded massive power controlling prices, routes, apprenticeships, and marriages within their ranks. Families like Lysandra's guarded alliances with iron grip, calculating marriages as carefully as shipping manifests. Love rarely entered the ledger, which makes this moment exceptionally reckless. The door bangs open, and you instinctively flinch, an impressive reflex considering no one can see or hear you. Two senior merchants stride in, both wearing robes embroidered with more gold thread than good sense. Lysandra and Corwin straighten instantly, masks of professionalism sliding over their features. Discussing trade routes? One elder merchant asks, eyeing Corwin with the suspicion of a man who distrusts anyone, with a healthy smile. Of course, Lysandra replies smoothly. The southern pass offers advantages. The merchant snorts. The southern pass is bandit land. If the convoy doubles its escorts, Corwin begins. Not your place to advise, the man snaps. Not yet. Corwin's sword-sharp smile never wavers, but you notice the muscle in his jaw tighten like he's holding back words that could cost him everything. Your first light joke of the section threads in as you imagine the elder merchant going home at night and telling his cat, "I yelled at a young person today. It was refreshing." The other merchant, kinder but still cautious, studies Lysandra. "Your father wants to see you," he says. "Now." She nods, though her eyes flick a fast, worried glance toward Corwin. When she walks away, you drift after her for a moment, catching the tension in her shoulders, the silent plea in her quickened steps. But another sound tugs at you back in the Guildhall. Corwin's sigh, heavy enough to bend metal. So you return, settling near him as he grips the table, grounding himself. After a moment, he pulls a small pouch from his belt. Inside are spices, saffron threads glinting like sunlight, peppercorns smelling sharp and earthy, dried rose petals, soft as whispers. He pours a few into his hand, staring at them, as though trying to memorize something that might soon be forbidden. A quirky historical tidbit flutters into your thoughts. Spices were so valuable in medieval Europe that some were used as currency. Peppercorns could pay rents. Saffron could settle debts. A pouch like Corwin's is basically a portable profit report. But what he's holding isn't just trade stock. It's a memory. Footsteps echo again, softer this time. Corwin turns, and there stands Lysandra, returning far sooner than expected. Her face is flushed, her breath uneven. "What happened?" Corwin asks quietly. "My father," she starts, then stops, pressing a hand to her chest. "He wants to arrange my betrothal. To a man from the Northern Guild." Corwin's expression fractures not visibly, but deeply. "When?" "Soon." Her voice cracks. "Very soon." Silence settles like dust, fine and suffocating. He opens his hand slowly, revealing the spices. "Do you remember," he says gently, "when we met? You scolded me for sneezing on your father's inventory." Lysandra almost laughs. "Almost. It was pepper dust. You inhaled half your own wares." "I wanted to impress you," he says. "Instead, I nearly died." You mark your second light joke here, imagining Corwin dramatically fainting into a pile of cinnamon like some tragic medieval diva. She steps closer. Dangerous. Foolish. Irresistible. "You cannot be here when he announces it," Lysandra whispers. "If my father suspects—" "He already suspects," Corwin murmurs, lifting her hand gently. "But he doesn't know." She shivers, not from cold, but from the truth they've both been dodging. Historians still argue whether merchant daughters like Lysandra were as trapped by alliances as noblewomen, or whether some families allowed more choice. Letters and ledgers give mixed signals. But in this room, in this moment, it's painfully clear. Lysandra's life is about to be sold like cargo. She pulls her hand away suddenly. Too suddenly. Her eyes dart toward the door. Someone's coming. Corwin backs away, slipping the spice pouch into his cloak. Just as the door opens, he's at the far table, pretending to copy a ledger. The guildmaster enters Lysandra's father, tall and imposing, with a beard that probably has its own bylaws. His eyes slice through the room like a measuring scale weighing profits. He scans Corwin without a shred of warmth. "See me after midday." Corwin bows slightly. "Yes, guildmaster." The guildmaster leaves, robe swishing with self-importance. Lysandra waits until the hall settles. Into silence, then looks at Corwin, really looks at him. Her expression trembles around the edges like wet ink. "What will you do?" she whispers. He lifts his chin, eyes steady. "What I must." A line that means everything and nothing at once. Your third light joke arrives as someone upstairs loudly drops a box of metal scales, followed by a colourful swear you decide not to translate because this is PG-13. Lysandra steps back. Corwin steps forward. But neither crosses the distance between them. Not yet. The Guildhall settles into the hum of quills scratching ledger pages, merchants shuffling parchment, apprentices spilling ink. But beneath it all runs a quieter pulse, one of two hearts trying very hard not to break in synchrony. Trade routes bend. Fortunes shift. But some risks, like love, can't be priced. You step out of the Guildhall's ledger-scented air and glide toward the castle grounds again, where the late afternoon sun paints the world in warm amber and uneasy expectations. A breeze brushes through the courtyard banners, tugging at them like impatient fingers, and you can feel something shifting subtle as a breath, heavy as a prophecy. Because in the highest rooms of the keep, behind carved doors that rarely open for honesty, the royal family is rehearsing a performance that has nothing to do with music and everything to do with political choreography. You slip inside the upper chambers, not through the guarded entrance, but along the currents of story pulling you upward. The princess is there. Elara, her posture perfect, chin lifted, hands clasped in a way that suggests she's trying to hold her own ribs together. Across from her stands an attendant adjusting the folds of her ceremonial gown, murmuring about posture and presentation and how royal composure must be. Effortless. Even during emotional turbulence. Which is kind of like telling someone to look natural while juggling flaming turnips. You drift nearer, taking in the room. Tapestries depicting heroic ancestors doing heroic ancestor things. A tall window overlooking the kingdom she's supposed to marry into safety, and on the table, a scroll bearing the seal of the Northern Court. The marriage proposal. Clear, official, and absolutely not open to negotiation. Elara keeps glancing at that scroll as though it might bite her. Or maybe she hopes it will. At least that would give her an excuse to drop it. She finally dismisses the attendant with a soft but firm nod. When the door closes, she slumps, not dramatically, but in that quiet, collapsing way you only see in people who spend all day wearing invisible armor heavier than steel. You follow her as she crosses the room, touches the window's edge, and stares out toward the horizon, the north, where her future is supposedly waiting, like a diplomatic trap disguised as a castle. Then her gaze drops to the gardens below, and there he is, a young court artist Rowan, not the messenger from earlier, but another Rowan entirely, because medieval naming conventions did not care about your narrative convenience. This Rowan sketches portraits, illuminates manuscripts, and generally tries to remain invisible in a building where invisibility is safer than gold. He stands in the garden now, head bowed over a sketchbook, sunlight glinting off the edge of his charcoal. Ilara's breath catches, soft as silk sliding from a table. A mainstream historical fact slips into your thoughts. Royal marriages in medieval courts were political contracts first, personal tragedies second. Princesses could influence alliances, territories, and wars simply by being born female and noble. Their hearts weren't just ignored, they were liabilities. And Ilara's heart, at this particular moment, is behaving with reckless independence. She steps back from the window as if distance alone could erase the ache. But her feet betray her, they carry her toward a smaller side door, one that leads to the private stairs the royals use when they want to be unseen by public eyes. Which is hilarious because nothing says, I'm hiding something like a prince or princess, sprinting down a staircase, like an over-caffeinated squirrel. You follow her through the winding steps. The air here is cooler, quieter, dense with the scent of old cedar and secrets. She slips into the garden, glancing around before walking toward Rowan. He notices her shadow first, then looks up. The shock in his expression is brief. He's trained to hide reactions, but the warmth isn't. His eyes soften, then sharpen, then soften again, as if he's revising a sketch in his mind. Your Highness, he murmurs. Rowan, she replies, her voice almost steady. She sits beside him on the stone bench. Too close for propriety, too far for honesty. You settle nearby in the branches of an obligingly nosy fig tree. What are you working on? She asks. A study of the northern ridge, he says, showing her the charcoal strokes, mountains and clouds, and the faint silhouette of a keep. Northern territory, the territory she's expected to call home. Her jaw tenses. You draw it as though it's welcoming. He tilts his head. It may be, It won't be for me. He hesitates, then asks against all his training, against all common sense, "Do you want it? The match?" You almost clap your hands in ghostly delight. Finally, someone in this kingdom asks a useful question. Elara shakes her head, the movement small, sharp. They want me to admire the political necessity. They want me to pretend I don't have my own thoughts. Rowan looks at her carefully, as though afraid a single wrong expression could tip her off a cliff. "You do have your own thoughts," he says gently. "Too many, maybe." Her lips almost curve. Your first light joke lands softly. If medieval matchmaking were an actual sport, Elara would be benched for refusing to act supportively decorative. Rowan closes the sketchbook slowly, as though putting away courage he's not sure he should carry. "There are places beyond these walls," he says quietly. "Lives not hinged on treaties." "You think I haven't imagined that?" she whispers. "That I haven't pictured slipping away with nothing but a cloak and a future no one controls but me? You have someone to slip away with?" he asks, before he can stop himself. She freezes. He turns pale. "Forgive me. That was... No," she interrupts. "It's fair." And she looks at him. Really looks. Rowan's breath stutters. Historians still argue whether medieval royals allowed themselves romantic attachments outside arranged marriages. Some records hint at secret loves. Others condemn them as scandal. But watching Elara inch closer to Rowan, you realize the debate isn't about romance at all. It's about the universal human impulse to want, even when you're told not to. A quirky historical tidbit nudges in. Some royal households kept companion artists, chosen specifically for their discretion. They painted, advised, and occasionally acted as emotional confidants, which is fine until feelings exceed job descriptions. Elara traces the edge of Rowan's sketchbook absent-mindedly, her fingers brushing his. It's barely contact, just a feather's kiss of touch, but it shatters something brittle between them. "I don't want the Northern Alliance," she whispers. "What do you want?" he asks. She hesitates, then says, so quietly you almost miss it, "Something real." Your second light joke surfaces as a gardener in the background drops a bucket and loudly curses at a very innocent bush. Way to support the mood. Rowan's hand inches toward hers, stops, then inches again, until their fingers meet in the rate. Smallest, bravest connection. The kind of touch that could start a war if anyone important saw it. "You know we can't," Rowan begins. "I know what they say we can't," she interrupts. "But tonight, I don't want to hear it." He searches her face. "And tomorrow?" She swallows. "Tomorrow exists," she echoes the raven's sentiment from the festival. "But I'm still here today." The moment holds. A bee hums past, very nosy, very judgmental. Your third light joke slips in. Even the bee looks like it wants to file a report. They sit together as the light fades, hands barely touching, hearts very much not obeying orders. The garden breathes around them, the castle watches, and far to the north, an alliance waits impatiently, sharpening its expectations. But right here, right now, a princess leans into a future she's not supposed to choose, and a court artist lets himself want what he absolutely shouldn't. You drift away from the garden's lingering warmth, just as twilight settles into that dusky in-between, where day sighs itself into night, and everything feels softer, more secretive, as if the world is intentionally dimming the lights for the next forbidden chapter. The path pulls you toward the forest edge, where ancient oaks lean like wise old eavesdroppers, and the underbrush rustles with quiet, cautious life. A thin mist crawls along the ground, swirling around your ankles like a cat deciding whether to adopt you. This forest isn't the sort painted in fairy tales with friendly mushrooms and whimsical deer. No, this one is the kind villagers whisper about after too much ale. The kind where outlaws vanish, where lovers hide, where kings avoid hunting not because of danger, but because the forest simply doesn't care about their authority. And tonight, tucked deep within its mossy embrace, two lovers have taken refuge, lovers whose families would rather see them wed to political convenience than to each other. You follow, the faint glow of a small fire, until it blossoms between the trees, a soft halo, illuminating two figures, huddled beneath a cloak that's clearly meant for one person. But they are very determined, possibly stubbornly determined, to share it anyway. Itzan and Marianne. He's a blacksmith's son, broad-shouldered, smoke-scented, hands calloused from shaping iron. She's the daughter of a wealthy landholder, refined, educated, the kind of person raised to marry territory rather than affection. They're here because they ran. Because no amount of scolding, bribing, or strategic betrothals could make them unlove each other, you slip close as Itzan adjusts the firewood, his movements careful so as not to wake the forest's sharper ears. Marianne leans against his shoulder, cheeks flushed from both cold and nerves. The fire crackles, sending thin sparks into the air like tiny fire spirits attempting amateur flight. "Do you think they're still searching?" she whispers. "Of course they are," he replies, trying to sound brave. "Your father probably hired half the countryside by now." "Half?" she huffs softly. "You underestimate him." Your first light joke of the section flutters in as you imagine Marianne's father charging through the forest, waving a contract like, "You will marry who I tell you, young lady, preferably someone who can afford better cloaks." The forest canopy hums overhead, branches swaying gently, as if intrigued by the drama beneath them. Crickets chirp in rhythmic unison, and somewhere, a distant owl hoots with the distinct tone of, "Good luck with that." A mainstream historical fact slips into your thoughts. Medieval forest outlaws weren't always criminals. Many were simply people who defied unfair laws, poachers, escaped serfs, or lovers running from arranged marriages. Forests became unofficial sanctuaries for those who had no place else to go. The law called them fugitives, but ballads called them heroes. Tonight, Itzan and Marianne are halfway between both categories. Marianne unfurls a small bundle. She brought bread, pears, and a wedge of cheese that has seen better days. Itzan pulls out a small flask of watered wine. They make a meager but earnest feast of it, sharing bites the way only people in love and in trouble can manage. "You should sleep," Itzan murmurs. "I'll keep watch." "You've said that every night," she counters. "But you never sleep either." He pokes at the fire. "One of us has to keep an ear out. And you think I'm the one who won't wake up if a bear wanders in? You'd welcome it with a curtsy." She swats his arm gently, trying to hide her smile. You catch the glimmer in her eyes, the mix of fear, exhaustion, and something stubbornly hopeful. Historians still argue whether couples like these truly manage to disappear into forests, or if those tales are more romanticized myth than reality. Some records suggest a few made it, building quiet lives in hidden clearings. Others say they were inevitably dragged back. But watching these two, you feel history folding and unfolding around them, like pages deciding which story to write. The fire crackles again, louder this time, startling both of them. A branch snaps somewhere beyond the clearing. Itzan tenses instantly, hand reaching for the small hunting knife at his belt. Marianne grips his arm, breath sharp. You lean forward and spot the culprit. A deer. A very unimpressed deer, judging by its expression. Your second light joke drifts in, as you realize this deer looks like it wants to file a noise complaint about its forest being used as a lover's hideout. The deer snorts and wanders off, dignity fully intact. The tension unravels slowly. Marianne exhales. Itzan chuckles shakily. "See? You're safe. Nothing to fear. Except your cooking," she teases. "Hey, I can roast a rabbit, with enough salt to mummify it." He grins and the bode. The forest seems to smile with him. A quirky historical tidbit taps your shoulder. Medieval travelers often tied bells to their cloaks or horses to scare off predators at night. You glance at Marianne's cloak, no bells, only embroidered vines. Well, you think, no predators tonight, except stress. As the night deepens, fog drapes the ground in a silvery sheet. Itzan pulls the cloak around Marianne, though she tugs half of it back around him because "You'll freeze if you don't share, and I refuse to cuddle a popsicle." He relents, leaning into her warmth with that careful blend of tenderness and desperation. "You'd still choose this?" Itzan asks quietly. "Hiding, running, maybe never going home again?" She looks at him as though he's the only steady thing in a spinning world. "If home means living without you," she whispers, "then yes. I'd choose this. I'd choose you." He blinks hard, overwhelmed. You feel it too, the sweetness tinged with sorrow. The kind of moment that tightens your chest, even if you're technically just a drifting narrator ghost. Your third light joke arrives by way of a squirrel overhead, dropping an acorn directly onto Itzan's back. He jolts. Marianne stifles a laugh. The squirrel peers down like a judgmental landlord, checking for unauthorized tenants. They settle again beneath the cloak, leaning into each other. The fire wanes. The mist thickens. Their breaths sink, slowing, softening until the forest silence absorbs them. Tomorrow will force decisions. Tomorrow might bring search parties, hunters, demands, ultimatums. Tomorrow the world beyond this forest will remember their names. But tonight? Tonight, two lovers breathe in harmony beneath ancient oaks, protected only by shadows, hope, and the fragile courage that made them run. And for a moment, just one, the forest feels like it's holding them, keeping them, believing in them. You slip out of the forest's mist-soaked hush like a breath, finally released, drifting back toward the castle, where the air grows sharper, the stone walls taller, and the stakes heavier. Torches flicker along the walkways, their flames bending in the wind like uneasy messengers. Somewhere deep inside these walls, footsteps patter, whispers dart, and secrets attempt to stay hidden, but they never stay hidden for long. Not in a place built to observe everything. Tonight, you're pulled toward the servants' wing, a narrow lattice of corridors tucked behind the grandeur. Here, floors creak in protest, laundry steams in great billowing waves, and the smell of stew that has been reheated too many times lingers like an uninvited guest. It's a place of constant motion unseen by nobles, indispensable to them, and filled with people who know far more than anyone realizes. And tonight, a few of them are gathered in a dim linen room, huddled around a single stubby candle. These servants, 3 women and 2 men, whisper not about gossip, or pay, or kitchen mishaps, but about a plan. A fragile, reckless, desperately loyal plan. Because they know something. Something dangerous. Something about a noble and a scribe who've been meeting in secret, exchanging letters and glances, and unspoken hopes in corners that aren't nearly as hidden as they think. You slip closer as Lysa, the head laundress, a woman with forearms carved from a lifetime of scrubbing and a heart carved from something far softer, leans forward and whispers, "If Lord Renford finds out what his daughter is doing, that scribe will vanish before sunrise." The others nod gravely. A mainstream historical fact floats into your mind. Medieval servants often acted as silent guardians of the households they tended. Historical letters hint that many affairs, romantic, political, scandalous, were protected by servants who understood far better than nobles the consequences of exposure. They saw everything, forgot nothing, and intervened quietly when danger threatened people they cared for. Tonight, these 5 are doing exactly that. Corin, a young stable hand who always looks like he accidentally sprinted into the moment he's currently living, rubs the back of his neck. The scribe doesn't even know how close he is to getting caught. The steward's been snooping near his chambers, asking questions. "And the princess's maid," said Lord Renford, "is asking questions too," adds Nell, a kitchen helper with a habit of knowing precisely which hallway every pair of feet walks at every hour. "If we don't help them, nobody will." "But how?" Corin whispers. "We can't just tell them. That'll make it obvious someone warned them." "Then we don't tell them," Lysa says. "We nudge them." Your first light joke of the section bubbles up as you imagine a medieval PowerPoint titled "Secret Romance Risk Mitigation Strategies," with Lysa presenting and everyone taking notes with quills that keep leaking. Lysa pulls out a strip of folded linen embroidered subtly with a pattern resembling a feather. "It's not decorative. It's a signal," she explains in a low voice. "We place this outside the tower room before sunset. The scribe knows the code. He'll recognize it from the herb bundles he catalogues. It means, danger, do not stay." "But what about the noble?" Nell asks. "That's where Timon comes in," Lysa replies, turning to a footman who has the nervous energy of a man who once tried to polish a chandelier while hanging from it. "You deliver a message to her chamber, something vague but urgent, a summons from her tutor, her mother, anyone who won't be questioned too hard." Timon pales, then nods with the solemnity of someone accepting a doomed quest. You drift backward as their plan solidifies quiet exchanges, coded signals, a network of loyalty woven through linen rooms and stairwells. The castle might belong to nobles, but the servants understand it better. They move through it like bloodstream through veins. Historians still argue whether servants genuinely risked their safety to protect secret relationships like this, or whether romanticized accounts exaggerate their involvement. Some evidence points to cautious complicity, some to deliberate intervention. But the whispers here? They're real enough to make the walls lean in to listen. A heavy footstep echoes in the hallway. The servants freeze. The candle wavers. Someone outside mutters about missing chamber pots and shuffles off, but the tension lingers like smoke. You follow Lysa as she gathers the linen strip and slips through the service corridor with the stealth of someone who's been avoiding nobles her entire life. Each step is intentional, each corner checked, each breath measured. She moves up a hidden stairwell, used mostly by housemaids and unlucky errand runners. The narrow passage is dim, lit only by distant sconces. She treads lightly, her hands sure despite the risk humming around her. Near the tower's entrance, she places the linen strip neatly on the stone, just visible enough for the scribe to spot, just subtle enough that anyone else will assume it's a dropped cloth. Your second light joke surfaces as you imagine some clueless guard picking it up and loudly declaring, "Who dropped this fancy napkin?" And you shudder on everyone's behalf. Next, you trail Timon as he creeps toward the noble's chamber. He practices the message under his breath. "Your lady mother requires your presence." "No, too formal." "Your mother wishes to speak with you at once." "No, too suspicious." "Your mother says she's very upset and—" He winces. "Definitely not." Eventually he settles on, "Your lady mother asks for you." Simple, vague, effective. Timon approaches the chamber, knocks softly, delivers the line in a whisper through the door, and retreats so fast you swear his feet barely touch the ground. You glide back to the darn linen room, arriving just as the servants regroup. Their faces are tight with fear and hope. "Now," Lysa murmurs. We wait. Hours pass. Torches burn low. The castle quiets until even the mice tiptoe. You let the time stretch around you like cooling wax. And then, footsteps. 2 sets. Separate hallways. 2 people redirecting their paths because of subtle, invisible nudges. The plan worked. For now, the servants share a breath of relief. Soft and brief. They know this is only one night solved in a long chain of nights that could unravel at any moment. A quirky historical tidbit flits across your mind. Some medieval households kept whisper networks among servants in formal protective webs, built from trust, observation, and under-the-table communication. They were real, powerful, and quietly heroic. Tonight, you've witnessed one. Your third light joke trickles in as a potboy bursts into the linen room asking loudly, "Has anyone seen my other shoe?" And all 5 servants shush him with synchronized ferocity. They fade back into their duties, scattering into hallways like shadows resuming their proper places. The scribe and noble will never know how narrowly they escaped discovery tonight. They'll never know whose hands shielded their hopes. But you know. And the castle knows. And tomorrow? Tomorrow the servants will watch again, silent sentinels, holding the fragile threads of a forbidden love they never asked to protect, but chose to anyway. You drift out of the servants' wing and into the cooler, open-air corridor that connects the inner keep to the lower town, following the faint glow of lanterns that mark the path like breadcrumbs, guiding you toward the noisiest corner of medieval civilization, the tavern. Even before you reach it, the sound hits laughter, clinking mugs, a lute being played with more confidence than accuracy, and at least one person arguing with a door, because it looked at them funny. The Lantern Mare, as this tavern is affectionately and inaccurately named, squats at the edge of the square, its wooden sign creaking in the wind. And inside, gossip is bubbling so vigorously you can practically see steam rising from the rafters. Taverns are medieval news feeds, messy, loud, addictive, and tonight, the rumors swirling inside will prove dangerously close to truths certain people have been working very hard to conceal. You slip through the wall into the smoky warmth, drifting above a sea of faces flushed with drink and speculation. A barmaid darts between tables, balancing mugs with acrobatic precision. A bard sits on a stool strumming half-hearted chords while staring into the middle distance, like he's waiting for heartbreak to commission his next song. At a corner table, leaning over mugs of ale, sit the 3 most dedicated gossip distributors in the entire town. Branth, a local tradesman with impressive sideburns. Edda, a midwife who somehow knows everyone's business before they do. And old Tovin, who claims his ears are sharp as hawk talons, though he's currently yelling because he can't hear the lute. You drift closer, not to eavesdrop, obviously, but to observe historical communication systems in action. Very scientific. Edda leans forward with the kind of conspiratorial intensity that makes you automatically lean in too. "I'm telling you," she says, "there's something happening up at the castle. Love something. Forbidden something." Branth scoffs. "The nobles don't do romance. They do treaties. Everyone knows that. Shows what you know." Edda fires back. I saw the steward speaking with the guild courier. Whispering. Whispering never means taxes. Whispering means scandal. Scandal, Tovin. She said scandal. Who's Sander? Your first light joke lands neatly. If gossip were an Olympic sport, this tavern would take gold, silver, and bronze, probably while arguing about who got which. At the next table over, you notice another pair leaning close. A travelling minstrel and a peddler, both eager to share whatever tidbit they picked up from guards, stable hands, or extremely talkative chickens. The minstrel lowers his voice dramatically. I overheard that someone saw a noble sneaking into the old tower. At night. The peddler's eyes widen. Alone? No, the minstrel whispers. With someone who wasn't a noble. A ripple moves through the tavern like wind through tall grass. Heads turn, voices drop, curiosity sharpens. This is how dangers begin. A mainstream historical fact floats into your thoughts. Medieval taverns weren't just drinking dens, they were hubs of information exchange. Merchants swapped market intel, travelers shared news, and locals stitched gossip into elaborate tapestries of maybe true stories. And those stories could spread faster than an unguarded fire. Just then, the bard stops strumming mid-note, startled by the murmuring buzz. He perks up like a dog catching scent of food. Scandal equals inspiration, after all. You brace yourself for a ballad in progress. You move deeper into the tavern, where shadows cling more stubbornly and conversations grow more dangerous. At a far table sit two men you recognize from the castle guard off duty, boots muddy, tankards already half empty. They're talking quietly, but not quietly enough. Lord Renford questioned me today, one says, rubbing his forehead, asking if I'd seen his daughter wandering where she shouldn't. The other nods grimly. The steward asked me if I'd noticed the scribe acting strange, said something about checking the tower rooms. You sense the shift instantly. This is no longer gossip but evidence. Pieces that, if combined, could unravel everything the servants worked so hard to protect. Historians still argue whether guards were more motivated by loyalty, coin, or boredom. You get the sense these two would happily trade a scandal for a story just interesting enough to brighten their shift. Your second light joke slips in when one of them tries to drink from the wrong side of his tankard and then pretends he meant to do that. Across the room, Edda stands abruptly. She's heard the guards too. You watch her cross the tavern with the confidence of someone who has delivered 47 babies and 6 lectures to noblemen. She leans toward the guards' table. Mind your tongues, she warns. Rumors grow legs here. Long ones. Dangerous ones. The guards blink, slightly intimidated, fully confused. Branth calls after her. What do you know, Edda? She freezes. A single beat. Then she answers. Enough to keep my mouth shut. Something you might consider. You want to clap. Loudly. Except you can't. So you settle for swirling near the rafters in approval. But the damage is already done. Rumors are seeds, and this tavern is very eager soil. A man near the door pipes up. I heard the noble lass has been skipping lessons. Another adds, I heard a scribe's been acting odd. Someone else chimes in. I heard the crown prince is in love with a goat. Everyone turns. The speaker blinks. Wrong story? Yes, half the tavern shouts. Your third light joke arrives with impeccable timing. Still, beneath the laughter, something more troubling brews. Because while the tavern crowds spiral into increasingly ridiculous theories, a quieter, sharper conversation happens at the back table, two cloaked figures sharing a hushed exchange. You drift their way. You think it's true? One mutters. A noble meeting a scribe? If it is, the other replies. That's opportunity. Leverage. And leverage earns coin. A chill skates across your shoulders. Danger doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it sits in a tavern corner and plans what information is worth selling. The chatter around you grows louder, faster, looser. Rumors become stories, stories become accusations, and accusations get carried home to spouses, friends, and worst of all, curious servants who will repeat them at work. You slip outside as the tavern door bangs open and a drunk man serenades the moon with a song about cheese betrayal. The stars blink overhead. The wind cools your face. Inside the walls of the castle, two lovers believe their secret is still safe. They have no idea that tonight, in a tavern thick with smoke and stories, the first cracks in their protection have begun to form. And cracks, no matter how small, always widen. You leave the tavern's smoke-thick whispers behind and drift into the open night, where the stars burn sharp and cold like pinpricks on velvet. The gossip still crackles in your ears, a fuse lit and burning its way toward consequences no one is ready for. And while rumour spreads its restless wings in town, the castle across the hill glows with lanterns, pockets of quiet light behind shuttered windows, each holding secrets tighter than clasped hands. But far beyond those familiar walls lies another story tonight, one that stretches across borders, cultures, and the dangerously thin threads tying kingdoms together. You feel the pull like a tug at your sleeve, drawing you along the winding road leading to the outskirts of the city, where an encampment of foreign merchants settles beneath fluttering pennants embroidered with deep indigo patterns. This is where cross-cultural trade flourishes, and where suspicion flourishes even faster. You glide between the tents, letting the scents envelop you. Cardamom, incense, star anise, rare woods, and spiced wine simmering in a copper pot. A soft hum of foreign dialects weaves through the air, familiar to some, unsettling to others. Each tent is a small world unto itself, lined with woven tapestries, glittering trinkets, and carved keepsakes carried across mountains and seas. Near the largest tent, two figures stand in the dim glow of lanterns, faces partially illuminated, partially hidden. One is Anara, daughter of a merchant lord whose caravans stretch across 3 kingdoms, sharp-minded, determined, quietly rebellious. The other is Sir Kale, a knight entrusted with monitoring foreign visitors for security purposes, though what he actually does is stand around looking fearsome and very confused about his feelings. And those feelings? Right now, they're practically scribbling love notes across his armor. Anara crosses her arms, staring at him with suspicion edged by warmth. "You followed me," she says, not accusing, just stating fact. Kale shifts awkwardly. "I was assigned to ensure your camp's safety." "You were assigned to stand guard at the gate," she counters. "I walked." She raises an eyebrow. "All the way here?" Kale clears his throat poorly, loudly, tragically. "It's a very long walk." Your first light joke of the section sneaks in. Even his armor seems embarrassed for him, creaking softly like it's trying to scoot away. You settle close as the lanterns flutter in the evening breeze, casting dappled shadows across their faces. Their worlds couldn't be more different, his shaped by rigid hierarchy and military expectation, hers by open caravans, winding routes, and cultures interwoven like braided silk. A mainstream historical fact drifts gently into your thoughts. Medieval, cross-cultural encounters were complex, often regulated by trade laws, political treaties, and mutual suspicion. Yet, despite that, there are records of friendships and yes, romances that sprung up between foreigners and locals, especially during long caravans or diplomatic visits. Many faded after the journey ended. A few changed destinies. Anara glances at the campfire, where her companions laugh softly, sharing stories of faraway sands and desert winds. She looks back at Kale. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," he says. "Your commander will question you." "I know. My people will question me." "I also know." "And yet you're still standing right in front of me." He exhales. "I know." Anara's laugh slips free, rich, surprising, entirely unwilling. She steps closer, studying his expression. "You're bold for a man who looks terrified." Kale straightens. "I'm not terrified. You're trembling." "It's the armor," he insists. "Is it?" "Yes." You can practically hear the armor muttering, "Don't drag me into this." Around them, the encampment glows softer as more lanterns are lit. Shadows ripple across the tents, like waves on fabric seas. A merchant nearby begins tuning a 2-stringed rebec, plucking a low melody that settles into the night like a story being born. Historians still argue whether romances across cultural lines faced equal resistance or exaggerated opposition. Some say curiosity bridged divides. Others insist fear and political anxiety kept such connections brittle. Watching these two tiptoe along a border neither of them drew, you can feel the tension of that debate humming like a bowstring. Anara shifts, her expression softening. "Why did you come?" Kale hesitates. "Because I wanted to speak with you. And I wanted to ask something." She tilts her head, then ask. He takes a breath so deep it seems to rattle his bones. "Will your caravan stay long?" Anara blinks, surprised by the question's simplicity. "A few more days. And after that? We ride north," she says, "past the river, beyond your borders." The words strike him not like a blow, but like a truth he'd been trying very hard not to name. He swallows. Will you return? Anara's eyes soften. Why do you wish to know? And here it is, the moment he's been circling like a wary wolf around a fire. I care, he admits quietly, more than I should. Anara looks down, her fingers brushing the hem of her embroidered sleeve. The lantern light catches the gold threading, turning it into a river of molten metal. She whispers, I care too. A gust of wind flutters through her campsite, carrying smoke, spice, and something unnameable between them. Your second light joke drifts in as you notice a merchant behind them aggressively haggling with a goat, which appears to be the superior negotiator. Kale steps even closer. Now, the space between them shrinking to nothing but breath. Then why does it feel like you're already half a world away? She inhales sharply. Because I am. My life is not your life. My voice is not welcomed in your court. And your presence in my camp stirs distrust. A shadow ripples behind the tent flap, her mother. Perhaps, or one of her father's advisors. Anara notices and steps back instinctively, though her voice stays steady. Even now, someone is wondering why you're here, and someone else is wondering why I haven't sent you away. Kale's jaw clenches. Tell me to leave, he says quietly. If you truly want me gone. Anara closes her eyes. She doesn't speak. Silence stretches thin and fragile as spun sugar. Then she whispers, I don't want you to leave. Your third light joke sighs in as a camel in the far tent loudly sneezes, startling half the encampment and ruining the moment with admirable precision. They both jolt, then share a shaky, breathless laugh. The lantern between them flickers, casting shifting patterns on their faces. For a moment, their distance collapses, not entirely, not irrevocably, but enough to feel real. Anara touches her chest gently. When we ride north, I'll carry this with me, she murmurs. And I'll stay, Kale replies, carrying the same. Different worlds, different duties. But for one moment, they meet in the middle, under lantern light, under suspicion, under the weight of everything they'll never be allowed to say aloud. Tomorrow will pull them apart. Borders will pull them apart. But tonight? Tonight they stand close enough that the world feels briefly, impossibly small. You drift back toward the heart of the castle, where night has settled into a steady hush, broken only by the occasional clank of a guard's armor or the distant hoot of an owl that has absolutely seen too much. The corridors are mostly empty now, servants asleep, nobles behind locked doors, secrets tucked away like letters in hidden compartments. But one window still glows. High in a side tower, not the lover's tower, but a quieter, less romantic one, you find a room lined floor to ceiling with shelves. Scrolls, books, wax tablets. The air smells like dust, ink, tallow, and the soft, musty comfort of stories that haven't been read in far too long. This is the domain of the royal chronicler, and tonight, its occupant is very much awake. You slip through the door and find Master Edran, the kingdom's historian, hunched over a desk that looks like it's losing a long war against parchment clutter. His hair is wild in the way only people who live among books can manage, and his candle has burned down so far it's basically a heroic puddle. He's supposed to record battles, royal births, treaties, and notable happenings of the realm. Very official, very serious, very do not include gossip. And yet, scattered among the careful annals, are stray notes that you look suspiciously like he's been paying attention to more than grain yields and troop movements. Tonight, he's frowning at 3 different scraps of parchment. You recognize them, in their own way. One mentions a noble seen often near the old tower. Another notes that the scribe has been requesting extra ink and working late. A third, written in a different hand, probably from a servant, speaks of linen strips left as coded warnings and of a narrow escape from discovery. Edran taps his quill against his lip, trying to assemble these puzzle pieces into a coherent picture. Something is happening, he mutters to himself, and it's decidedly not about taxes. Your first light joke arrives as you glance at a neat stack of tax records sitting untouched on the corner of his desk, radiating pure, unappreciated boredom. A mainstream historical fact slides comfortably into place. Royal chroniclers weren't just record keepers, they were filters. They chose what to include, what to omit, what to embellish. Their quills sculpted the official memory of kingdoms, smoothing out scandals and rebranding disasters as strategic retreats. What they didn't write could be as powerful as what they did. Edron sighs and rubs his temples. He isn't young anymore. Long hours bent over parchment have curved his back and stiffened his fingers. But his mind is sharp as ever. Sharper, maybe, because he's had years to watch patterns repeat. Love, he knows, has always complicated politics. He mutters, first the knight staring at the landholder's daughter like she's the last cup of water in a drought. Now this noble and scribe business. The world never tires of repeating itself. He reaches for a leather-bound volume, a previous chronicle he himself penned years ago. The ink has faded, but his notes are still clear. An older scandal, carefully smoothed into bland neutrality. A noble lady withdrew to a quiet life after a discreet arrangement. Translation. Somebody fell in love with the wrong person, and the court reshaped the narrative to make sure no one remembered. Historians still argue whether chroniclers like Edran were loyal truth-tellers or careful propagandists. Some point to brutally honest entries about famines and failures. Others highlight suspicious gaps where scandal should have been. Watching Edron tonight, you sense he's caught between both roles. He dips his quill, hesitates, and begins writing. This year, beneath the calm surface of the court, certain undercurrents have become apparent. He stops, shakes his head, scratches the line out. You slide closer over his shoulder, reading his next attempt. Though the kingdom stands, as ever, at the balance of alliances and oaths, one cannot help but note the persistence of private loyalties that defy official arrangement. He pauses again, chewing the end of his quill. Ink stains his lower lip. He doesn't notice. Your second light joke wanders in as you imagine him later reading these ink-splotched chronicles and thinking, ah, yes, the era of my accidentally ate my own quill phase. He looks up at the shelves, hundreds of stories, thousands of lives, all reduced to neat lines of text. He knows he has the power to expose or protect, to carve these forbidden loves into permanence, or to leave them in the realm of rumor and memory. On the table, there's a small wooden box. He opens it. Inside are slips of parchment he was never paid to keep. A few lines of an old love letter confiscated years ago. A sketch of a tower window. A servant's anonymous warning scribbled on laundry tags. Tiny artifacts of human risk and human hope. History is cruel to hearts, he murmurs. We remember kings and wars, but not the people who tried to love quietly in the margins. A quirky historical tidbit nudges your thoughts. Some medieval chroniclers did include strange little side notes, comets seen at night, odd dreams, or rumors of star-crossed affairs. Later readers sometimes found these scribbles and wondered why they were there, half hidden in the margins, like guilty secrets the writer couldn't fully suppress. Tonight, Edron's fingers hover over the box. He could burn these scraps. He could copy them into the official record. Or he could do something in between. He lights a fresh candle, pushing the old puddled one aside, and opens a blank folio. No royal seal, no official heading, just empty parchment waiting for words. And he starts to write, not in the stately, rigid script of court annals, but in a more fluid hand, less formal, more human. He writes of patterns he's seen, nobles and scribes, knights and landowners' daughters, princesses and artists, merchants and strangers from distant lands. He doesn't name names, he doesn't give dates, he simply records a truth, that, while treaties and titles shape the visible history of the realm, a quieter, more dangerous history runs beneath, powered by people who loved where they were not supposed to. Your third light joke arrives gently as you imagine future scholars poring over this secret folio and arguing, is this a private diary, or did the chronicler just get bored of writing about wheat yields? Edron pauses, flexing his stiff fingers. Then he whispers something, only you in the empty room hear. If I write it plainly, they'll punish them. If I hide it completely, they will vanish as though they never lived at all. He looks out the narrow window, where the lights of the town twinkle and the forest looms dark beyond. Somewhere out there, lovers are hiding. Somewhere inside these walls, others are pretending not to be what they are. So, he mutters, I'll leave it half hidden. He returns to the official chronicle and writes a single, careful line. It is recorded that among these years, private loyalties sometimes complicated public duties, as is often the way with humankind. No names, no specifics, But anyone who reads between the lines, anyone who has ever loved or wanted or risked, will understand. He closes that volume, then tucks the unofficial folio into the wooden box, alongside the scraps of anonymous love. Instead of locking the box away, he slides it onto a shelf behind a row of dry treatises about trade regulations, because absolutely no one opens those unless they have to. You can't help your quiet, sleepy smile. It's a strangely fitting hiding place. Real hearts, tucked away behind the driest parts of history. He snuffs one candle, leaving the room bathed in a single, softer glow. His shoulders slump, but there's a faint relief in his expression, as though he's made a choice he can live with, even if others never know he made it. Tomorrow, he'll go back to writing about borders and battles. Tonight, he chose to acknowledge the invisible battle lines drawn inside people. He may not save them, he may not betray, but he refuses to let them vanish completely. And in the quiet scratch of his quill, on that hidden folio, the forbidden loves of this kingdom find a fragile kind of immortality. Not shouted, not spotlighted, just not erased. You drift away from the chronicler's dim little sanctuary and descend the narrow stone stair that twists down the tower like a spine. Outside, night has deepened into a cool velvet blue hush. The wind murmurs against the battlements, tugging at banners that no longer snap proudly but sag like they know what's coming. Because something is coming, something fast, dark, and storm-fed. You step through the castle gates and let the air pull you eastward, toward a stretch of countryside where clouds boil low and urgent over the horizon. The smell hits first: rain-soaked earth, iron-sharp ozone, and the unmistakable tension of two hearts beating against time. Down the muddy path, illuminated by the occasional flare of lightning, two figures stumble, forward coats snapping in the wind, boots slamming against churned mud, urgency carved into every motion. The lovers in escape. Rowan the messenger, our first Rowan, not the princess's Rowan, has returned sooner than expected from his northern route, cloak plastered to him by rain, hair dripping like he's personally offended the weather gods. By his side, Mira clutches a small satchel, her baker's apron knotted tightly beneath her cloak, breath coming in soft, terrified bursts. The storm is no accident. It's a deadline written across the sky. You fall into step beside them, invisible but feeling every thrum of their panic. "We should have left an hour earlier," Mira gasps. "You were gathering supplies," Rowan replies. "We can't travel without food." "I meant an hour before that," she huffs, before the guards started asking questions. A crack of lightning tears the sky open. Thunder follows a heartbeat later, loud enough to rattle your ribs. Mira flinches. Rowan takes her hand not brazenly, not boldly, but because in this storm, reaching for each other is the only way to stay steady. You catch your first light joke rising in your mind. If storms had personalities, this one would be yelling, "Go home, you reckless children." They push onward, deeper into the downpour. Sheets of rain slice sideways, stinging like tiny thrown pebbles. Mud splashes their legs, wind whips leaves from trees in frantic spirals. A mainstream historical fact flashes through. Medieval escape attempts were often timed around storms because rain, muffled footsteps, washed away tracks, and kept guards indoors. The downside? It also turned roads into ankle-breaking sludge pits. Equal opportunity difficulties. Rowan glances behind them, not paranoid, just painfully aware that tavern gossip spreads faster than lightning. He knows how rumors grow legs. He knows how one wrong whisper can put a knight on horseback riding out to intercept them. "Keep close," Rowan says, lifting his voice over the wind. "I am." Mira snaps, then slips on a patch of mud and winds up grabbing his arm so tightly he winces. Your second light joke arrives immediately. She clutches him with the survival instinct of someone refusing to become a tragic folk ballad. The path narrows as they reach a wooden bridge spanning a river so swollen with rain it looks like it's frothing with anger management issues. The bridge creaks ominously under the combined assault of wind and water. "We can't cross that," Mira says. "We have to," Rowan replies. "Unless you'd prefer turning back." They share a look. Turning back is not an option. Step by step, they inch onto the bridge. The planks groan beneath them, water sloshing over the edges. Rowan places himself slightly ahead, gripping Mira's wrist so he can yank her to safety if anything gives way. Lightning flashes again briefly, illuminating the river, swirling below like a giant, furious cauldron. You hover above the bridge, feeling the way it shudders under every gust. Mira's lips whisper a prayer not to saints, but to anyone listening. A quirky historical tidbit flickers into your thoughts. Some medieval people believed thunderstorms were caused by giants playing bowling in the sky. Watching this storm, you absolutely understand the theory. Halfway across, the wind slams into them so forcefully that Mira staggers sideways. Rowan pulls her back with a sharp, panicked shout. The bridge bucks under the pressure. "Hold on," he yells, voice nearly drowned in the gale. She clings to him, eyes wide. Her hair whips across her face like frantic ribbons. They push forward, step by painstaking step, until finally, they reach the far side, where the land slopes upward toward the cover of the trees. They collapse under the shelter of a large oak, chests heaving, every inch soaked and shaking. "Are you hurt?" Rowan asks, brushing wet strands from her face. "No," Mira whispers, "but I'm thinking very rude thoughts about bridges." "Understandable," he murmurs, smiling despite everything. You catch their breath steadying, the storm roaring around them like an angry guardian they've narrowly slipped past. But safety isn't here. Not yet. Rowan rises, offering her his hand. "We keep moving," he says. Mira takes it without hesitation. They climb the muddy slope toward the forest, boots sucking free of the ground with wet, miserable sounds you would absolutely not want in any lullaby. Every step is a fight. Rain blinds them. Wind shoves them sideways. They keep going anyway. Because love makes cowards brave. Because fear makes brave people foolish. Because hope makes fools unstoppable. Historians still argue whether medieval lovers truly ran away together as often as legends suggest. Some scholars insist such escapes were rare and usually doomed. Others claim they happened more frequently, but the survivors were too busy hiding to record their victories. Watching Rowan and Mira struggle forward, you understand why the debate lingers, because this moment is both terrifyingly real and impossibly romantic. A branch snaps somewhere behind them. Rowan turns sharply. "Did you hear that?" "No," Mira answers, which means yes. Your third light joke breezes in. At this point, Mira's sarcasm has become its own survival mechanism. Rowan pulls her deeper under the canopy just as another bolt of lightning splits the sky. For one instant, the entire forest lights up, and you see them. Two figures on horseback, distant, silhouetted against the storm. Approaching. Not quickly, not yet, but steadily. Mira's hand tightens around Rowan's. "They found us." "Not if we move," he says. "Not if we're faster." "Rowan," she whispers, voice trembling. "I'm scared." He cups her cheek gently, rain pouring down his arm. "So am I." They share a breath, their fear, their courage, their stubborn refusal to stop now. Then they run, branches claw at them, mud grabs at them. The storm roars like a beast swallowing the world. But Rowan and Mira race through the trees with every ounce of strength they have left, hearts beating in frantic rhythm, hope dragging them forward like a rope pulled toward dawn. Somewhere behind them, horses splash through puddles. Somewhere ahead, the forest thins. And somewhere beyond that, a future waits. If they can reach it, you stay with them, Rowan, and Mira only long enough to feel their footsteps fade into the deep dark of the trees, their silhouettes swallowed by stormlight and hope in equal measure. Then the pull of the story tugs you sideways, back toward the castle, where other secrets shiver on the edge of discovery. Because while two lovers run for their future, others stand dangerously close to losing theirs. Inside the keep, the storm outside trembles through the stone, humming like a warning chord struck by an unseen hand. Torches flicker under the drafts, sneaking through arrow slits, and the corridors seem narrower than usual tight, listening, ready to betray anyone careless enough to whisper. You drift through the hall where tapestries flap like restless sails, then curve down a servant's staircase into a dim passage that smells of damp mortar and overheard truth. That's where you find them, the scribe, the noble, together but not as close as they were in the tower. Tonight, caution coils between them like a third presence, silent and sharp. The noble paces, cloak whispering over the stone. "Someone knows," they murmur, voice cracking like the edges of broken parchment. "Someone was asking about the tower. My father questioned 2 guards today." The scribe stands stiffly by a support column, hands clasped behind their back to hide the tremble in their fingers. "Then we should stop meeting," they say, though their voice betrays them. It's steady the way watered wine is strong. "Stop?" The noble steps closer. "After everything?" It may be the only way to keep you safe. And you? They don't answer. You drift nearer, feeling the tension squeeze the air thin. Two lovers, cornered not by their own choices, but by the world that insists it owns them. Tell me what happened, the scribe pleads. The noble exhales hard. The steward questioned my handmaid. My father won't say it outright, but he suspects something. If he finds out. Their voice trails into the storm's growl. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. Medieval nobles treated marriages like political chess, and any unauthorized emotional entanglement was a liability, one that could tarnish reputations, dissolve alliances, even provoke feuds. Secrets like theirs didn't simply cause scandal, they could shift entire power balances. The scribe knows this. You can see it in their eyes. I'm sorry, they whisper. For what? The noble asks. For putting you in danger. The noble almost laughs a soft, broken sound. You didn't put me anywhere. I walked in willingly. Before the moment can settle, footsteps echo in the corridor. Both freeze. The scribe blows out the candle in a single swift motion, plunging the alcove into darkness. Only a slit of moonlight leaks through the narrow window high above, sketching their outlines in trembling silver. The footsteps grow louder, then stop, right outside the passage. Your first light joke slips in as you think. This is exactly the kind of moment where dramatic background music would be helpful. But medieval corridors have terrible acoustics. A shadow looms the castle steward, hunched slightly from age but sharp-eyed, carrying a lantern that scans the hall like a hunter's torch. Is someone here? He calls. The scribe's breath stills. The noble's hand brushes theirs quick, subtle, like a spark you're not supposed to feel. You pull yourself into the corner, though you don't need to hide, but instinct is instinct, even for an invisible narrator. The steward's lantern glow creeps along the floor, stretching toward the alcove. Its edge kisses the scribe's boot. Any closer, and a sound erupts behind the steward. A huge crash, metal on stone. You all jump, even the steward, and the scribe's boot slips just enough to nudge a loose pebble. It skitters. The steward swings around just as Timon, our nervous footman from earlier, bursts into view, holding a tray of plates. He has absolutely, definitely dropped on purpose. Sir! Sorry, sir! Lost my footing on the stairs! He babbles, cheeks flaming. The steward whips toward him, frowning. This is the third time this month. Do you drop things as a hobby? Timon nods vigorously. Yes, no, sorry, maybe. Your second light joke floats in. If accidental clumsiness for strategic distraction were a paid position, Timon would be the employee of the century. While the steward berates Timon, the noble and scribe slip deeper into the shadows, moving with absolute silence. You glide after them as the steward storms off, muttering about useless staff and plates costing more than my patience. Only when his footsteps fade does the noble sag against the wall, relief draining from their limbs. That, they whisper, was too close. The scribe leans forward, forehead resting against the stone, breath shaky. We can't keep relying on accidents. Accidents, the noble scoffs. Timon has the subtlety of a collapsing siege tower. That was planned. They exchange a look, fright and gratitude, mixing into something indescribably, painfully tender. Someone's protecting us, the scribe murmurs. Why? Because they care, the noble says. More than they should. The scribe exhales, tension folding into the corners of their shoulders. We have to be more careful. Careful won't save us, the noble replies. Caution won't save us. Then what will? You feel the weight of the question land like a stone. Neither answers, because in truth, they don't know. Historians still argue whether forbidden lovers in medieval courts ever truly escaped discovery. Some say yes, hiding in plain sight through orchestrated silence. Others say no secrets eventually seeped through cracks, carried by whispers or carelessness. And watching these two, you feel the fragile truth. They're balancing between both possibilities. The noble takes the scribe's hand firmly this time, no hesitation. If things worsen, you should run. And leave you? The scribe breathes. If it saves your life. No, not without you. The noble's jaw tightens. You must. No, the scribe repeats, quiet but unbreakable. I won't. Silence stretches, and then a sharp voice rings down the hall. Lady Renford? Both jerk apart. The noble straightens. "Here," they call, steadying themselves. A maid rounds the corner. "Your father is looking for you." Immediately, the noble nods, masking the storm inside with a mask of practiced calm. Before leaving, they brush their fingers against the scribes just once, quick, desperate, and then they vanish down the corridor, swallowed by duty. The scribe lingers in the shadow, staring after them as though trying to memorize the shape of someone who might soon be taken away. "Your third light," Joke whispers in, as a mouse pokes out from a crack in the stone, glances at the scribe's despair, decides this is too much emotional baggage, and scurries away. You hover beside the scribe for a few breaths, feeling the air tremble with everything unsaid. Nearby, thunder rolls again. Somewhere outside, the storm tightens its grip, and somewhere else somewhere's other lovers are beginning to realize that secrets don't stay obedient forever. You rise from the dim passage like steam lifting off hot stone and drift toward the great hall, because something shifts in the air, something taut and metallic, like a bowstring pulled too far. The storm outside hasn't eased. It rages against the castle walls as if trying to force its way in. Wind howls through arrow slits. Rain lashes banners until they snap like whips. And inside, people are being gathered quietly, deliberately, into a room where judgment has already begun to take shape. But you're not going to the great hall. Not yet. Instead, your feet, your ghostly feeling, nearly silent feet, carry you toward a narrow chamber behind the dais. A private room, a secret room, a dangerous room, because this is where Lord Renford sits with 3 advisors, their voices low and pointed, the air thick with suspicion sharpened into accusation. And in the center of it all, on a simple wooden stool, sits the scribe. Hands folded, face pale, eyes lowered. The noble is not here. Not yet. Which means the scribe is alone and very aware of what that means. You slip along the stone wall, settling into the shadow near a tapestry depicting some ancestor slaying a dragon that was almost certainly just an unlucky lizard. The advisors loom like vultures over a battlefield. "We found you near the tower again," one says, pacing. "Near the restricted rooms. I shelve manuscripts wherever I'm told," the scribe replies quietly. "Sometimes in the tower, sometimes not." The advisor taps a long finger against his chin. "And you carry notes, in and out. Late at night. Notes," the scribe answers, "are my job." A mainstream historical fact breezes in at the edge of your awareness. Medieval interrogations weren't always violent. Sometimes they were quiet, strategic, suffocating in their subtlety, words slicing thinner than blades, pressure applied in silence rather than force. Tonight is one of those nights. Lord Renford speaks at last, voice calm in a way that makes calm sound like a threat. "Someone claims they've seen you meeting with my daughter." The scribe's pulse spikes, you can hear it, feel it, thudding against their ribs like a warning drum. Someone. A rumor. A whisper that has found its teeth. "I speak to many nobles," the scribe says, "as required. But you speak to her," Renford says, leaning forward, "more often than you should." The storm punctuates his words with a long growl of thunder, as if nature itself wants to highlight the accusation. You drift nearer, watching the scribe's throat tighten. An advisor spreads 2 pieces of parchment on the table, one from the noble's chambers, one from the scribe's office. Just scraps, harmless, out of context. But the advisors stare at them the way wolves stare at tracks in snow. "They match a pattern," the advisor says. "Times, locations, meetings." The scribe looks down. "I don't understand." Another advisor steps closer. "We think you do." Before the noose of implication tightens further, footsteps pound down the corridor. A guard bursts in, rainwater streaming down his cloak. "My lord, Lady Renford is on her way." Renford's jaw tightens. And she insists on entering this room. Thunder cracks, hard, loud, the kind that shakes the hinges. Before anyone can protest, the door swings inward, crashing against the wall. There she stands, the noble, soaked by storm, hair wild, breathing hard, like she ran through half the castle to get here. Her presence slams into the room like a gust of wind, a fierce, unyielding force that refuses to be politely ignored. "What are you doing?" she demands, staring at her father with a steadiness so sharp it borders on defiance. "An inquiry," Renford replies coolly. "Sit." "No." The room stills. You feel everyone's breath freeze. You also feel the chronicler upstairs somewhere suddenly perking up, sensing dramatic history brewing. Your first light joke drifts in as you imagine a footman outside the door whispering to another, "This is above my pay grade," before immediately pressing his ear to the wall. The noble steps fully inside, slamming the door shut behind her. She looks at the scribe, not directly, but enough for the air between them to glow with fragile truth. "You will not question him alone," she says to her father. "He has been seen with you. He's been doing his work. Then he shall answer for himself." "Father." "No." The word drops like a guillotine. But she doesn't flinch. Instead, she moves to stand beside the scribe. Not touching. She doesn't dare that, but her nearness is a declaration in itself. If whispers started this trial, proximity may very well finish it. Your quirky historical tidbit floats in uninvited. Some medieval courts had a rule that accused persons had to stand at least 6 feet away from nobles to avoid emotional influence. Clearly, this court has not implemented that rule. An advisor clears his throat. "Lady Renford, your presence complicates. I intend to complicate it." Renford rises, palms flat against the table. "Then I must ask, why defend him so fiercely?" Her breath shudders. She searches for words. Not truth. Truth is too dangerous, but something close enough to shield them both. "Because," she begins, voice steady but trembling at the edges. "You are judging a loyal servant based on tavern gossip." That word again, gossip. It slithers through the room like smoke. Renford narrows his eyes. "Do you deny being in the tower with him?" The scribe stiffens. The noble lifts her chin. "I deny impropriety." Notice the precision. Not denial of presence, denial of scandal. The advisors exchange glances, a silent debate forming between them without a sound. Historians still argue whether medieval accusations of inappropriate relationships were genuinely investigated or simply used as tools of power. Watching this room, you realize both can be true at once. Then, another sound. Footsteps, but not hurried, measured, heavy, official. The door opens again, and the chronicler enters, candle in hand, parchment tucked under his arm. Face composed, but eyes bright. Too bright for a man who pretends to dislike drama. "Lord Renford," he says, bowing. "If this inquiry is to continue, it must be recorded." Renford hesitates. Because recorded inquiries official, inquiries can't be twisted as easily as private interrogations. Your second light joke rises. The chronicler has just performed the medieval equivalent of saying, "Let's put that in writing." And everyone suddenly found their posture. The chronicler moves between Renford and the lovers, placing his candle on the table with deliberate gentleness. "Proceed," he murmurs. Renford exhales slow and controlled. "Very well," he says to the scribe. "One final question." He leans in, dark eyes sharp as forged steel. "Have you engaged in any private, unsanctioned correspondence with my daughter?" The storm holds its breath. The noble tenses. The advisors freeze. Even the chronicler stills, quill poised above parchment. And the scribe looks up, straight into Renford's eyes. "I have," they say. Your heart lurches. The noble chokes on a breath. Renford stiffens. The advisors whisper. "And you." You feel the entire castle shift. But the scribe continues, voice clear despite shaking hands. Correspondence about poetry, about philosophy, about the restoration of older texts. Silence, long, unblinking, technically true, dangerously incomplete, but true. Renford studies him for a long, unbearable moment. Then he sits back, slowly. "So," he says, intellectual indulgence. Attention loosens just slightly, but only slightly, because something still lingers in the air, thick and electric, unresolved. Your third light joke sighs in as one advisor mutters, "Intellectual indulgence leads to trouble," sounding like a man personally wronged by literacy. Renford finally speaks. "This inquiry will pause until tomorrow." Pause. Not end. The noble sways just a little, not from weakness, but from the weight of what almost happened. The scribe exhales like someone who hasn't breathed in hours. The chronicler closes his folio. And you feel it. The truth hasn't been uncovered, but it has been cornered. And tomorrow could set it free, or crush it completely. Dawn doesn't so much rise over the castle as it creeps in hesitant, pale, and a little anxious about what it's walking into. The storm has passed, but the air still tastes like thunder, and puddles dot the courtyard like scattered mirrors reflecting a sky that hasn't decided whether it's relieved or disappointed the night ended. The castle is quieter than usual. Not calm, never calm now, but quiet in that tight way people get right before they expect something to break. You drift through the corridors, the stone cold beneath your non-existent feet, and follow the faintest thread of tension toward a balcony overlooking the eastern valley. There, alone against the widening blush of dawn, stands the noble. Their cloak hangs loosely. Their hair blows across their face in the chill wind. They look like someone who hasn't slept, not because of fear, but because their thoughts kept gnawing through the dark. The near discovery, the interrogation, the scribe's half-truth. Their father's set jaw. The chronicler's quill hovering like a sword with softer metal. You float beside them, just close enough to feel the tightness in their breath. Below, the courtyard stirs. A few guards begin their morning patrol. A stable hand leads out a restless horse. A dog trots after a maid carrying bread purely for security reasons. Probably. The noble wraps their arms around themselves. Reckless, they murmur. Foolish. Impossible. You're fairly certain they mean love, not the weather. Behind you, soft footsteps approach. The noble turns quickly, too quickly, and the moment they see who it is, the tight mask they'd worn fractures in quiet relief. The scribe, tired, anxious, eyes searching theirs like someone afraid the night has rearranged the world while they slept. "Are you all right?" the scribe whispers. The noble swallows, nods. "You shouldn't be here." "You say that," the scribe replies softly. "And yet you always meet me anyway." The noble looks away, cheeks flushing at the accuracy. "Last night." They pause, steady their breath. "You should not have answered him that way. And you shouldn't have barged into an interrogation chamber like a storm on legs," the scribe counters. Your first light joke slides in easily. You privately rate the noble's entrance a solid 10/10, excellent dramatic timing, strong door slam, bold commitment to chaos. The noble's eyes soften. "I was terrified for you," they admit. "I still am." "I know," the scribe whispers. "But I'm here." They step closer, not touching yet, but close enough for their breaths to mingle in the cold morning air. The dawn grows warmer around them, as if the sun is leaning in to listen. A mainstream historical fact settles quietly into your mind. Medieval dawns often served as moments of reckoning. Trials, duels, confessions, and decisions were commonly set at first light when minds were thought clearest. Clarity, of course, is a generous word for what's happening in this balcony right now. The noble closes their eyes. "My father will not let this go. He's never needed proof to act when his honor is at stake." "And what will he do?" the scribe asks, voice trembling just slightly. There is a long, painful pause. "Send you away," the noble whispers. "Far away. Somewhere your words can't reach me. Somewhere I can't." They stop. Breathe. "I won't let him." The scribe searches their face. How? A single word. A world of fear inside it. You know what they're both thinking. Running, leaving, escaping. But that road is treacherous, muddy with last night's storm, and thick with hunters who follow orders more loyally than hearts. Before either speaks, more footsteps approach, this time heavier, official. The noble tenses. The scribe steps back out of instinct. You drift around the balcony's arch just as Lord Renford himself emerges, cloak heavy, expression unreadable. Behind him stands the steward, eyes sharp, and behind him, the chronicler quill tucked into his belt, expression neither hostile nor approving but quietly alert, like someone watching dominoes begin to wobble. "Daughter," Renford says. The noble straightens. The scribe bows low. "You will come with me," Renford continues, "and the scribe will return to their duties until summoned." The noble's jaw works. "Father, no, enough." He walks away before she can argue, forcing her to follow. She glances back once, just once, at the scribe, a look that holds everything. Fear, longing, apology, defiance. And then she's gone. The scribe stands frozen a moment longer, the cold morning sinking into their bones. You hover beside them, listening to their heartbeat beat too fast, too loud, too afraid. They turn away slowly and walk down the corridor, not noticing the chronicler watching from the shadows. His eyes narrow, not in suspicion, but calculation. He is weighing something. You can feel it. The fate of two people might sit in the space between his breath and his next decision. Historians still argue whether chroniclers ever intervened in private affairs. Evidence is scarce. But tonight, or rather, at this dawn, you are watching one of those scholars pick a side. You trail him as he follows Renford and his daughter at a distance, slipping unnoticed down the stairs to a private council chamber where the Lord has gathered his advisors again. The storm last night washed mud from the walls, now only the scent of wet stone remains. Renford stands at the head of the table. The noble stands a few feet behind him, head bowed. "We must act," he says. "Punishment?" one advisor suggests. "Interrogation?" another. "Removal," Renford replies. "Send the scribe to the Northern Archive Tower, far from this castle." The noble stiffens. "Father, hush." "But father, hush," he repeats, harder. Your second light joke arrives quietly as you imagine a medieval parenting guide titled, "Hush, the only word you need when you're definitely making things worse." "I will not have scandal in this house. Not now, not ever." The noble bites their lip hard enough to draw blood. The chronicler steps forward. "My lord," he says carefully, "if I may speak." Renford frowns. "You may." "Exile is a powerful step," the chronicler says, "and I fear the court will see it as an admission that scandal truly exists." Renford pauses. Just enough for the chronicler to continue. "Better," he says, "to make this scribe's departure appear routine. A rotation for skill development, a reassignment for expertise, something you can defend if questioned." The advisors murmur approval. Renford considers. The noble's breath catches in a hopeful hitch. The chronicler adds softly, carefully, "and perhaps allow them to return, after a year." Renford lifts a brow. "And why would I do that?" "Because," the chronicler answers, "nothing fuels scandal like permanent separation." Another long, dangerous pause. Finally, Renford nods once. "Very well. A year abroad. Then we re-evaluate." The noble exhales. The chronicler closes his ledger with a quiet thump. The advisors nod sagely, as though this plan was theirs all along. But you feel what the noble feels. 1 year apart can break people, or save them, depending on what happens next. The meeting dissolves. Renford exits. Advisors file out. The noble remains, shoulders trembling imperceptibly. The chronicler approaches her quietly. "He won't be harmed," he says gently. "Not while I can help it." She lifts her gaze, eyes bright with gratitude and fear. "Thank you." "You should speak to him," the chronicler whispers, "before he leaves." Your third light joke floats in as a guard outside sneezes loudly, startling himself, dropping his spear, which clatters like a cymbal crash in an otherwise dramatic scene. You drift after the noble as she runs, not walks, not glides, but runs down the corridor, searching for the scribe. You drift after the scribe as they pace frantically in their workroom, trying to understand what they just heard. And soon, very soon, they will collide again. At dawn, in the last breath before the sun fully rises. And the reckoning waiting for them will change everything. The sun has barely cleared the ridge when the castle begins to shift and stir, doors groaning open, servants whispering, guards stomping dew from their boots. But beneath the ordinary morning movements is something restless, something tense, something shaped like the edge of a decision. You feel it as soon as you drift into the scribe's small workroom, where a single window spills pale light over shelves of ink pots and worn parchment. The scribe is already there, packed satchel at their feet, hands shaking, in their lap. Face pale but determined, as if they've spent the night gathering the fragile threads of courage and twisting them into a rope strong enough to face what's coming. 1 year of exile. A year away from the castle, and from the noble. You hover by the window, sensing every heartbeat. And then, a soft knock. The scribe's breath stops. The door creaks open. The noble steps inside, closing it quickly behind them. Their cloak is still damp from morning mist, their hair braided in haste, their eyes bright with 100 emotions crashing into each other like waves. They don't speak at first. They only look at the scribe long enough that silence becomes its own language. "You heard," the noble finally says, voice raw. "Yes," the scribe swallows. "A year. It's not fair. It's better than what it could have been. But it's still wrong." The scribe rises from the stool, hands trembling at their sides. "I won't argue that. They, stand facing one another closer than they were allowed to stand in any other room. Dawn glows around them, softening fear, sharpening the bitter sweetness. "You can't stay," the noble whispers. "I know. You don't deserve this. I know. You don't have to go," they murmur urgently. We could run. Tonight. Now. Before the horses are saddled, we could disappear into the forest, across the border anywhere." "No," the scribe says gently but firmly. The noble flinches. "Why not?" "Because running would destroy you," the scribe replies. "Your father would hunt us both. The chronicler tried to protect us. The servants risked their safety. If we run, we betray all of them." The noble turns away, pressing a shaking hand to the window frame. "I don't care about politics or consequences or any of it. I care about you." "And I care about you," the scribe says, stepping close enough that their breath warms the noble's cheek. "Which is why I have to go, and why you have to stay." A mainstream historical fact whispers into your mind. Lovers in medieval courts sometimes endured years apart, separated by war, duty, exile, and reunions were rare, but not impossible. Letters bridged the distance for some. Silence broke others. The noble's voice cracks. "What if 1 year becomes forever?" The scribe smiles small, sad, brave. "Then let forever be a choice we make when the time comes, not a fear we give up to now." The noble turns back toward them, and the distance vanishes in an instant. Their hands find each other, fingers weaving tightly, knuckles white. Touch so simple, so forbidden, so necessary. It feels like prayer written in skin instead of words. You feel the air thrum. Even the dust motes pause mid-air like curious little witnesses. Then the noble lifts a trembling hand and cups the scribe's cheek. The scribe leans into it. For one suspended heartbeat, they forget walls, fathers, advisors, expectations. Just two people, two hearts, one fragile moment. "You must promise me something," the noble whispers. "Anything. Come back." The scribe's breath stutters. "I'll try." "No, not try." The noble's voice steadies, fierce despite tears burning at the corners of their eyes. "Promise." The scribe hesitates. Not because they don't want to promise, but because promises are heavy, binding, sacred things in a world that punishes hope. "I promise," they say finally. The noble closes their eyes in relief only for a moment. Then footsteps echo down the corridor. They break apart instantly. Footsteps mean danger. Footsteps mean witnesses. Footsteps mean time's up. A maid calls softly through the door. The carriage is ready. The noble's face crumples, but only for a heartbeat. Then they stand straighter, hiding sorrow under practiced royal stillness. The scribe shoulders their satchel, breathing slowly, bracing for exile. "This isn't an ending," the noble says. "No," the scribe whispers. "It's a pause." Your first light joke of the section flutters in as you briefly imagine the two of them giving a coordinated, dramatic bow to destiny like, "We'll be back after these messages." The noble escorts the scribe halfway down the corridor farther than propriety allows, but they've already crossed so many lines another one hardly matters. They stop at the turn, where servants line the hall pretending not to listen, where the chronicler stands holding a sealed scroll for the journey, where the steward watches quietly with an unreadable expression. The noble can't embrace the scribe. Not here, not with so many eyes, but they bow to each other, deeply, with reverence, with everything they can't say aloud. The scribe exits through the courtyard, the noble standing frozen as they pass through the gate. The morning sun glimmers off the carriage roof. The wheels creak. Horses snort in impatience. A guard opens the door. The scribe climbs in. And the noble. They don't look away until the carriage vanishes over the hill, swallowed by sunlight and distance. You drift closer, standing beside them as they whisper, "Come back to me." The wind answers by lifting their cloak, rustling the leaves, nudging the words skyward. Historians still argue whether lovers parted this way ever reunited, or whether their stories became quiet, tragedies folded into books no one finished. But you, suspended in this moment, feel the fragile thread still tying these two together. Distance is a threat, but not the end. Not yet. Not ever, if hope holds. The noble wipes their eyes, straightens their shoulders, and walks back inside the castle, not with defeat, but with resolve that burns brighter than dawn. Because a year is long, but love, even forbidden love, is longer. And now, as we ease away from the castle halls, from storms and secrets and promises whispered, at sunrise, the pace of everything begins to soften. You step back from the stone corridors and the trembling hearts that filled them, letting the sound of distant hoofbeats fade until they're nothing more than a faint memory brushing against your ears. The world grows quieter. The colors dim into gentle charcoal blues and muted silver. The air itself feels warmer. A slow exhale after holding tension far too long. Even the wind settles into a slower rhythm, rustling only the edges of the grass as if it's trying not to wake anyone. The castle that felt so heavy with expectation now seems far away, softened by distance, blurred by mist. Its walls no longer press inward. They simply stand, watchful but calm. And the forest beyond leans a little closer, stretching shadows like blankets drawn over a restless child. You breathe in, slowly, deeply, and the echoes of the lovers' footsteps, their choices, their fears, their fragile courage drift away like dust motes in pale morning light. You let those echoes go, little by little, until only the quiet remains, until only the soft pulse of your own calm heartbeat keeps time. The night holds you gently, the way an old friend might offer their shoulder after a long, emotional story. No more urgency, no more hidden corners, just stillness stretching wide and warm around you. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let your breath slow. Let the final images of the tale melt into a soft blur, torchlight fading, a carriage vanishing over a sunlit rise, a promise lingering in the cool morning air. It's time to rest now. You're safe. You're warm. Let sleep come softly.